Hey, what's up, guys? This is Lucas Burnley. You are listening to the Edge and Flow podcast. I'm here with my co-host TJ Schwartz, and today we have a very special guest. We have Ernest Emerson. Uh, Dude, I don't even know what else to say. So let's just kind of fire it up. How are you guys doing?
I'm
I'm
doing
doing.
good.
I was just gonna add one little tidbit. I'm betting if someone's listening to a knife podcast and that's how they spend their time, we don't have to introduce you too much. Just they're familiar with the name. So
Well,
We're gonna explain all of it anyway, but yeah, Emerson Knives needs no introduction. We're gonna get into the custom side. Kind of, we're gonna get into the same thing we're always talking about, which is life and business and families and the culture around what we do. And yeah, it's gonna be good.
well, I got to add this. One of our slogans is famous in the worst places. So that may be very true, but
it's a good one.
trying to move into the good places too. But uh, no, I'm kidding. But that is one of our slogans, and it's a fun thing, and a lot of people get a chuckle out of that.
Yeah.
It's a solid one. Where should we start, TJ?
Yeah. Well, Ernest, I'm very curious. The real basic timeline of you getting into knives would be a good way to start. So we just have that foundation. And we'd love to ask a lot of why questions today and kind of dig into the headspace and how things progress and how the industry progressed. But maybe just like the very beginning,
Sure.
why did you start?
Okay. Well, being from northern Wisconsin, like so many places in the United States, you grow up around a hunting culture, and guns and knives and everything they're just another tool in the toolbox. In fact, I got to segue for just a moment, if you don't mind. Um, in my house, my dad was and I'm not bragging because he just was my dad. He really was this guy. He was a consummate hunter and fisherman in our community and around the area. And I was just thinking the other day, there was something going on about guns on as a result of some heinous shooting or something that happened again and again. And I was like, you know what? All of my friends, every single one of them, there were gun cabinets in the living room. There were guns, the safe, whatever. Most of them didn't even have safes because we didn't have to worry about people breaking in. But in my house and everything, I know my dad kept his rifles up in the closet above in the bedroom. I never once was ever tempted to go and see my dad's guns or get it out and fondle it or whatever you want to call it. None of my friends, and I mean these were all good old boys. No
Mm-hmm.
one, no matter where we were, no one ever opened up a gun cabinet and said, "Here, check this out" or anything. It was like a crescent wrench in the toolbox. And I don't know why I'm going off on this so much, but it was one of those things where I was like, it almost seems like city people have this high fascination with the gun representing some kind of power or some kind of whatever. I got a gun in my hand, my truck is bad. I'm bad too, that kind of stuff. And I was just thinking about that gun. We never had that fascination. We grew up with them. We used them all the time.
They weren't a
And
taboo.
yeah, it wasn't taboo, and it wasn't even
Right.
there wasn't a curiosity about them because we just grew up with them. And I think a lot of people miss that when they talk about guns in the United States.
Yeah.
Most of the United States is okay owning rifles and pistols and shotguns and everything else. And
I mean,
that's
knives fall into that too, right? Which is
hell
for
yeah.
us in our industry, just a commonly used tool. I loved someone
Yeah.
asked, like, why do you carry a knife? It's like, so I can cut things. Like,
Oh,
why do you carry a flashlight? So I can see at night. I mean, these are pretty simple, but if you're not familiar, you weren't raised in the culture, I mean, movies play a huge role, right? So you
big
have
time
these
now.
different cultural attachments, and I think that's where the taboo comes from, and then the taboo creates interest. I mean, how many kids started doing martial arts because of martial arts
Sweet.
movies in the 80s, and you're thinking, oh, some blood
I was
sport,
one.
I'm gonna do same here. And that's my point, right? It's like you see it, that's not the day to day,
Yep.
right? And we're like looking at it going, man, I don't know, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it's funny. Again, I'll get to answering your question, TJ, but we did a lot of. I was the thing that people don't, I think, know about me is I was an instructor and a fighter, uh, way, way long before I ever had anything to do with knives. One led to the other, but we'll get to that to answer your question. But in a lot of the classes that, as I started teaching with some other groups and things, uh, which got led into a whole bunch of firearms training and all that, there were people that we would run into that literally would think that a gun might go off by itself sitting on a table. And so, like when you said about the movies and all that, that's a direct result of that stigma that's become part of the common knowledge, I guess, against people, among people that are totally unfamiliar with firearms and maybe even against firearms and all that.
Sure.
So, but I always thought that was funny. It's like, it's like your car doesn't start up and drive out of the driveway by itself.
Inanimate object. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
But anyway, TJ, back to your question. Um, because I was grew up in that culture. Of course, knives were something that we used every single day. My grandfather gave me my very first pocket knife, which was a little Barlow folder. That's what I called it. And I remember we were out on the back. I grew up on a farm, and so we were on the back porch of the farm house, and I was 8 years old, and he pulled it out of his pocket and he said, "Here, I want you to have this." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome." And he said, "But don't tell grandma about it because she'll get mad."
Mhm.
So that was my first knife that I
How old
actually
were
had.
you, do you think?
I was 8.
8.
Yeah. And, I carried it to school. I carried it everywhere I went. I only wish for all kinds of different reasons, I wish I still had that knife, but I had no idea wherever it went and where it
Those
got
are
left
good
behind.
ones.
But yeah, the thing was what led me to actually becoming a knife maker was, like you said, those martial arts movies and all that. I was a subscriber to Black Belt magazine back in 1967 of all times when I was only 12 years old. And lo and behold, I have the original issue with Bruce Lee on it as the Green Hornet. It's a green cover, and it's actually, I didn't realize it, but it's actually a collector's item now and all
Oh,
that. So
sure.
I had to put it away and not touch it anymore. But I was fascinated with it. Of course, the Green Hornet was on and all that good stuff. But I started becoming interested in the martial arts, and so I started looking, training by looking at the sequential photos in the magazines that showed you how to block a punch and do this and that. Anyway, uh, when I when I really turned the page, though, was when I went and saw my first Bruce Lee movie. Which, again, I might sound a little quirky, but I think I saw Enter the Dragon probably 25 times now in
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
lifetime. But uh, at that point, I was about 16, 17 years old, and I was traveling 80 miles one way to go take these lessons up in Duluth, Minnesota at the YMCA and all that good stuff. So I was pretty hooked from the very beginning. And then when I got old enough, I was in college and training with a bunch of guys there. I was on a team on the school and all this and that. But I there was nowhere on earth that taught JKD, which is Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's martial art. And so when the time came, uh, I moved to California for only one reason, not for sun, sea, and surf or any of that. I moved out here to go to a school that was called the Filipino Cali Academy, which was run by Dan Inosanto and Richard Bastillo. And they were the two students at that time that were given the mantle by Bruce because he was I don't know if he actually had been. No, he passed away after I moved out to California. So I never met him or anything like that. But I was in that school, and what happened was, and I fell in love because it was full contact fighting. It was everything I wanted to do, and all that good stuff.
How old were you then?
I was probably at that point, I must have been about 21 or 22, somewhere in that range. Um, and so we got to the point where it was funny because when they start their system, I remember talking to Danny one time. He said, "Well, here's how we do it. You know, uh, we spend the first like 6 months on boxing, and because what we've found over the years is that most people come and go, and if they're here for 6 months, that's a good thing. That's actually kind of a long period of time for people that come in and sign up and then decide it's not their thing. But we want to be sure that we give them something that they can walk out the door with, that they might actually be able to use if they walked out and some guy was standing there and wanted to take a swing at them. So the first 6 months was basically boxing and some kicking and things like that. And then after that basically transpired, they started to introduce some of the eskrima with the sticks and the cane swords or cane knives, machetes basically, and also the balisong, the butterfly knife.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, and get this, the school dues were only $12.50 a month. And I mean,
amazing.
it is amazing, but I was so freaking poor that there were months where I couldn't even afford to pay the dues. And so I'd talk to Dan or Richard, and they'd say, "Oh, Ernie, just go clean the bathrooms up, you know, make sure everything's put together and put away and swab the floor or whatever." And so I'm just painting the picture of I didn't have any money. And then they introduced us to the balisong. And at that time, which this is an ironic part of the story, the only ones that you could get outside of knowing somebody from the Philippines actually was Pacific Cutlery.
Yeah.
Which was and became Benchmade. It was run by Les Diasis. And lo and behold, they were like $125 for just a basic Weehawk blade.
What year would have this been?
Oh gosh, 80s, somewhere in the 80s, 80. Let me look at my certificate.
He started early 80s, right?
Yeah, it was early 80s.
Yeah.
Anyway, so being poor, I couldn't afford to buy one because that was like astronomical price. Holy smoke. And so I went to Richard and I said, "Do you think I could borrow your knife? I think I might be able to make one of these." And he was like, "Yeah, go ahead. Here, take it." And so I took it home. Being a farm boy, I knew how to kind of put things together and how to use tools and stuff like that. And so what I did was drilled holes with a hand drill and some aluminum, kind of screwed them together. I took a blade and I cut it out with a hand hacksaw, and with a file ground the bevels on it and all that good stuff. And then heat treated it with a blowtorch. It was some '01 tool steel that I got my hands on. And so put it together, used some dowel pins to, you know, be the pivot points and all that other good stuff. And didn't even have a latch on the bottom because I didn't have the wherewithal to build a latch to pull the knife open. But I figured if I had it in my hand, it was going to be open anyway. So brought it back. And of course, Richard was a no, is it okay if I swear once in a while?
Sure thing. Just talk. Okay. You're good, man. Yep.
Richard was a no shitter. He was actually a real rough and tumble guy on top of everything else. And he looks at me and he goes, "Well," he goes, "it's not good, but I guess it'll do." And I was like, oh, that was like a blessing. That was like having a saint come down. These are my heroes, right? And anyway, so what happened was I found out because everybody wanted, "What's that? Let me see it, blah, blah, blah." There were other starving students at the school. And they were like, "Man, do you think you could make me one of those?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think so. You just pay for the materials and I have fun doing it." And, you know, it's about $10 worth of stuff in it or whatever. And so I made a few knives for the other students at the school. So those are my first real making knives for someone else, which I would consider, I guess you'd call it custom knife making.
Yeah,
they were real crude. Don't get me wrong. I still have mine and things like that. But I just wonder whatever happened to some of those other ones I made for some.
How many do you think you made in that time?
Oh, I'm 3 or 4 max.
Yeah. And you have yours?
Yes, I do.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
So
that was a cool start. And then but I didn't see myself as a knife maker. I was still, I wanted to fight. That was the only thing I wanted to do. Is I love, it sounds weird when I say I love violence, but I thrive with violence. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the Irish thing. I have no idea, but I love being involved in mano a mano sports and mano a mano fighting and combat and all that good stuff. So that's just me. And I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent, but I realized who I was. So
does it calm you down? Like, does it slow you down? Like flow state? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing because it's funny you mentioned that. I've really not had anyone bring that up, but it's absolutely true. I feel real comfortable, and
yeah,
it's not, believe me, as a segue, maybe part of it is I got the living heck beat out of me a bunch of times when I was in school. It is a grade school and high school, actually, because I was a pretty good athlete. 4-year letterman, 3 different sports, all that good stuff.
wow.
So I'm not bragging, but I really was. But it was only because of the work that I put in, trying to be as good as I possibly could. But because I was that, I was one of those guys, the jocks,
put a target on your back.
Big time. And I got the crap beat out of me a bunch of times. And at that time, I wasn't like, I'll fight you for anything kind of deal. But maybe that helped, I guess, shape the end product, which is me.
Yeah.
And so I felt, I'm not going to let that happen to me anymore. So I started doing all this other stuff. But anyway, back to that whole story. Then, as I didn't see myself as a knife maker, but I trained every single day. And it was funny because I'll tell you another quick story. God, you don't mind me rambling on?
No, keep them coming. This is the point.
Okay.
We don't have a timeline. Like, this is it, man.
Mm-hmm.
I progressed really fast in all the training that I was doing, wherever I was and whatever I was doing. And I realized something a year early on was people would say, why are you getting promoted to this, or why are you getting to go to this class? And we're still here and all this, just small talk type stuff. And I said, I realized that a lot of these guys, because our classes were the ones I was in, it was Tuesday and Thursday night from 7 to 9 o'clock. And I realized that a lot of these guys, that was the extent of their training time, which in reality that's school time. That's when you're learning. That's not when you're so much training. But with me, because of my quirky personality, I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning every single day, and I would train for an hour and a half to 2 hours. So I was getting 10, 12 hours of training in per week. And then when I was in school, in class, that was when I was learning. And I realized that was the difference. And that was actually the key to getting where you're going, and to put in that extra effort and do things like that. And it's funny because I played semi-pro baseball. I went to school at the University of Wisconsin, lacrosse on a football scholarship and all that. And so I was an athlete, and I looked at myself as an athlete, but everything that happened to me, every single thing, was because this guy trained 5 hours a week. I trained 20 hours a week. And, and it's stuck with me for my it became part of my ingrained personality, that if I'm doing something, I'm throwing myself in the deep water right from the get-go. And so I guess kind of circling back to what I was trying to get to before I hit all these side roads, was I didn't really make any more knives. I loved knives. I loved Bowie knives, all that good stuff. I carried pocket knives, everything. I think I owned a Spyderco at one time for a long, long time, used that, Buck 110, all of those good things that we all go through. And then they had gun show out here in California that was the Pasadena Gun Show, and it had over 6 miles of aisles in it. And so my wife and I went one time, and we were traveling all over heck in the show, looking at all the cool stuff. And then I saw a sign above one of the pavilions that said knife pavilion or something like that. So I said, "Hun, let's go in there." So I went in there, and lo and behold, uh, the one guy that I talked to that I remember was Mel Pardue.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot of other knife makers there too, and some local guys from California, and some probably some famous guys that I just didn't know who was who at that time, because this was like, what is this? And so I was talking to Mel, and I said, "What's up with these knives? Do you make those?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm a custom knife maker." And I go, "What's a custom knife maker?"
Mhm.
And he goes, "Well, we make knives and we sell them, and that's what we do." And I said, "No, wait. This is what you do for a living?" And of course, Mel was a full-time maker. And he said, "Yeah, that's what I do." And I looked at my wife and I go, "Oh my God." So I bought a book there called Knives and Knife Makers by a guy named Sid Latham. And I went home and I was hooked. I was so freaking hooked. You can't
That
believe
book
it.
will do it too. I probably got 2 copies up on that shelf right there.
Oh, no way.
That one,
That's
yeah,
fun.
that'll hook you in. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I was working at I was working for Hughes Aircraft, which is a aerospace place at the time. And I actually started making knives because I'd gone through an apprenticeship program as a machinist to get to tool and die maker and some other stuff. And so I had a real good background then at that time. This was in probably the late 80s, maybe 88, 89, something like that. So I knew how to work. Now I had tools and knew how to work the tools and all that, although I didn't have milling machines and all that at home, but that was soon to be. But I started making them during my lunch hour and things like that. I had a really cool boss. He was a Vietnam vet and was a knife guy and all that. So he let me fiddle around with things during break and even come in early in the morning and use some of the machines to make some knives. And I got to the point where I started doing it. Every time I sold a knife, I would buy a new drill press, or I would buy a drill press, or I would buy a bench grinder, or buy. I eventually bought a jet bandsaw, which was like the most expensive thing I ever
Game
bought.
changer though at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Really.
So anyway, I got to the point where I was making some knives just for myself and all that, and then I went to the California custom knife show that was run by Dan Delavan. At that time, it was probably his father. I can't remember his first name, but
Mhm.
Dan Delavan's dad. And it was like, holy mackerel. There's not just 5 guys making custom knives. There's a lot of guys making custom knives. And then uh, I saw Michael Walker and all those other guys that were, to
This
me,
is peak
just,
time. I mean,
oh,
Yeah.
California Custom Show, early 90s.
oh
I mean,
gosh, it
this is
was,
like a bunch of guys just rocking in their prime. Like,
yeah,
oh man, it's so good.
it was, let's say, just pretty inspirational.
Yeah.
And of course, I
Certainly.
had one of my crude Emerson made knives in my pocket. And I ran into a guy, his name
Were
was
they still
Mark.
Balisongs at this time, or were you doing
No,
folders?
it was a lockback folder, because I,
Okay.
I took a buck 110 apart and was like, okay, I can probably make this happen. So
Hmm.
anyway, um, I showed it to a guy who was a dealer, and he said, "Ernie, I'd like to work with you," because maybe he saw something, I don't know. But uh, I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I'll take all your knives and I'll
Wow.
resell them." And I was like, "Okay, that sounds good." So that kind of put me on the more or less full-time hobby while I still worked at Hughes Aircraft.
Yeah.
But I worked all every evening, and then all days on weekends and all this other good stuff. And then um, gained a little bit of foothold on the knife making, custom knife making, and all that, and things kind of progressed. And then I came home one night to my wife, who I could never have done anything without her, because she was my rock that I got to use as my foundation for everything. I said, honey, I think I could make a living as a custom knife maker. And she goes, what?
Mhm.
And I go, yeah. And now bear in mind, this job that I had at Hughes Aircraft was a top tier job for anybody uh, in the trades or anything, because it had every benefit, paid vacations. I mean, the whole 9 yards, from getting your glasses paid for to, everything. And she said, after a while, we talked about it. And she said, well, if you think that could happen, uh, let's do it. And
Wow.
I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. Thank you,
Mhm.
Jesus. And so then it actually was a weird thing, because I actually, it happened at a time when I basically cut my thumb off, which is another weird story. But I, I was out working on a square wheel grinder on a flat platen, and or a flat uh, grinding surface, and I was using one of those damn, what do you call them? Like a
Oh,
Cratex
yeah.
belt that was fuzzy,
Ah.
and I was doing the back of the knife like,
Hmm.
so it was a big fixed blade, but I was doing this on it, and I went too far this way, and it caught that knife. Or wait, this way, and it caught that knife, and it flipped it up, and it went right into my thumb like that, and it cut my thumb off to the point where it was just hanging by the skin on the backside.
Oh man.
And
Oh,
it was like,
wow.
oh, this really sucks. And so I, and it's funny because I ran in the house, and my wife goes, well, let me see it. And I said, honey, if I let go, I think it's going to fall off on the floor.
Oh
Right.
man.
So anyway, long story about that. But at that time, I was still working for Hughes Aircraft. And what happened was I had to take time off. So I was off for about 6 weeks because I had surgery and had tendons reattached and the pins in my thumb and all this. So I couldn't work as a machinist. And so, but here's the funny thing. I built this plastic, thermoplastic, like support that I
Like
could
a
hold a
splint.
knife on it.
Oh, man. I love
And
it.
so I could grind with this plastic abomination that I built that was like a claw, like a kind of thing with a notch in it to hold the blade and all this and that. So I kept on making knives. Uh, but it was funny because at that time I started thinking, man, this is really what I want to do. This is really what I want to do. And that led to me being off time from Hughes for about 6 weeks. I produced enough knives, they sold, and that's when I approached my wife, because I went back to work and stayed there for about another, 6 months to 9 months or something. And then I came home and I said, hon, I don't like working for anybody. It's not
Hmm.
because I have a chip on my shoulder or anything. I just want to have my own business, and that right now is going to be custom knives, and that's the story, and that's started one thing to the next. Now,
Man. Yeah. What? Okay. So at this point, so in tangents are actually kind of our thing,
Yeah.
man. Like we wouldn't have conversations if they didn't go in 50 directions.
yeah,
But I'm just thinking, so at this point, you're working as a machinist, you're headed to be a tool and die maker. So, right. So you're at this point, you're probably a pretty proficient machinist, right?
I knew guys that were a lot better than me,
Sure. But
but
you've got it. Okay.
yeah,
You don't have kids at this point.
nope.
No kids.
Oh,
Okay.
wait,
Married? Oh,
wrong.
maybe.
Yes, I did. I had two, Megan and Rachel.
How old at that point?
Well, the Megan and Rachel are 4 years apart, and I'll tell you how this relates to the story about my
Mm-hmm.
thumb. Uh, Rachel was about 5, so Megan must have been about 9. Now, the reason I got that locked into my head is because when that I had this little area in my garage that I kind of framed up that was no bigger basically than a shower, a pretty decent sized shower. and put uh, a curtain on a rod to go in and out to keep the dust contained in that area so it wasn't all over my garage. Well, I didn't know this, but when that knife hit my thumb and cut my thumb, my little daughter, Rachel, who was probably 5 at the time, was standing at the curtain, and she had just pulled the curtain open to see if I wanted to go play, basically. And I didn't even see her because at that moment, there's only one thing that happened is I got messed up. So she told me, and this has only happened about 2 or 3 years ago. She came to me, as a full grown adult. She goes, Dad, I'm so sorry. It's been eating at me for all these years that
Oh,
I startled you and made you cut yourself. And I go,
Oh
what?
man.
What are you talking about? And she goes, I pulled the curtain back and you got cut because the knife hit your hand. And I was like, honey, I didn't even know you were there. You didn't startle me. That was my bonehead,
Wow.
stupid thing to do, which, I'm guilty of doing a lot of bonehead
it's
things.
amazing what gets internalized that you don't know though. That's like
Oh.
I've got right now, I've got a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. TJ's kids are right. You're what, 6 and
3 and 5.
3
Yeah.
and 5.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's like, you just never know what they're
Oh,
thinking, what
Yeah.
they're
yeah.
seeing. And then, I mean, that's a big one to carry with you
Oh,
for a
she
long
carried it
time.
for that long. And I
Yeah.
was like, Rachel, for gosh sakes.
Man.
But
Okay. So that
yeah.
and you're how old at this point?
Oh, I was probably 26, 27,
Yeah, sub
28.
30. So you
Yeah,
had kids
30.
pretty early. But that,
Yeah.
it's always interesting watching the progression from people making and having a second job. And then it's like the real job, it becomes the second job, but you're in it, right? And
Yeah.
that jump, like I look in certain ways, I feel really lucky because I did that before I was married, before I had kids. And when I look, I'm like, oh Lord, I would never want to live like that again. But
Yeah.
it was the same thing, which was I just worked and I learned and I look, I'm like, I don't know if I would be where I am if I hadn't had that time. It's always amazing to me when people make that jump once you're kind of an adult with a wife, kids, because it's a huge decision.
It's a lot of
It
responsibilities that you
is.
didn't have
Well, and
prior.
it's a little interesting because it reminds me just a little bit of, some of Ken Onion's story where he got injured at work. And that was sort of a moment of reflection, maybe kind of the way he described it to me, where he's injured at work. He has to be at home. He's already into knives, but he starts to think about, mechanisms and, what he can do with his free time now that he's kind of rested up. And
Hmm.
it makes you wonder, just think about the way the world works and how an incident like that can cause moments of reflection and just change everything.
Oh, it changes everything. And the thing I always tell, when I talk to my students and the guys that I have here at the shop that work on the production, um, I don't see myself as a boss as much as I see myself as a coach. Because my one of the things that I learned early on was uh, outside of maybe your father or maybe a favorite uncle or something like that, your mom too for sure. But there's one person in your life that is can be probably one of the most major influences in your entire life, and that's a coach. Whether it's your baseball coach or your basketball coach or football or whatever it happens to be, uh, the role of a coach, being outside of the family is part of it also, and being a mentor to these young kids. One of the things that I realized, having grown up under the shadow of Vince Lombardi and people like that, was that they were more concerned about producing a better person than they were about producing a better player. Because if you produce a better person, you're going to get a better player in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at that and said, you know what? Uh, that's I guess that's part of the teacher in me, because when I was in college, that was what I was going to be. Was going to be a teacher. It was going to be physical education and history. But you know, I had identified or fallen in love with teaching early on in a in my life too. And it was, I always looked at it when I'm talking to the guys out here. I use every single thing. We have a meeting every Monday. Uh, I want them to better themselves. And if I inspire them to come to me after the meeting and say, Ernie, I don't want to work here anymore. I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a police officer, or I'm going to join the Marine Corps, then I've done my job. Uh, and so I run the risk of telling my employees that they can do better than working for me. But at the same time, we've got people that have stayed here for years and years and years, and I've actually had guys tell me, Ernie, you're my second father. And so my goal is just to produce better people, and if they do the job that they're supposed to do, then we've got a good person and a good worker. And so I can't remember how I got off on this tangent, but
it's a great one though. Honestly, man, that just thinking around coaching, I never had a coach until martial arts, and is a very similar experience. Very, very close relationship. Looked up to him as a father figure. Really difficult when he passed, but I lean back on that all the time. And I think about it. I mean, that's what he did so I went into Bill Packer's American Kempo Karate Association when I was 12 years old.
Yep.
In there, I found an instructor who had been there for a long time, but I trained with him until I was almost 30. And by the end, he was my kickboxing coach when I was a teenager. And by the end, we were just doing combatives and hanging out and playing around. And I look back and I'm like, there's so much there that those were the only experiences of that type of kind of friendship, leadership, guidance.
Yeah.
That were there. So I love that especially with employees. I really struggle with it. I'm not an employee. So I really struggle with the idea of having employees, and that idea of coach really tracks. I love that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it's the way to, I guess, well, I don't know exactly how to put it, but it's a way to, if you can inspire people to want to do better and be better, then if that's the result, that they end up being a better person, that's going to stay with them as a habit, if hopefully for the rest of their lives. That's a high calling, and that's a noble endeavor. So it's and it builds loyalty, and it builds friendships and things like that. I've worked at places, and I've worked at a bunch of different places, all kinds of stuff, from working on the railroad to different machine shops and auto mechanic, printing press guy, all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. Most of my bosses, they didn't care about me. They didn't care at all about me. They cared about results, and I got it. I'm being paid to do something. But people sometimes need guidance. They need somebody that they can count on, that they can talk to about that. I couldn't go and talk to my boss about the fact that my mom, I'm making this up, but I never had a boss that I could go to and say, hey man, I found out my mom's got cancer, and man, I don't know what to do and all that. And that's the guy that I want to be, is the guy that has the time. Because if they're talking to me, that's important. They would not be approaching me if something wasn't important to them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people just don't see that in other people, and it's kind of a sad thing. But we have a pretty big happy family here and all that. And, TJ, I can't remember, you set me on this road, but I can't remember what the original question was.
Good job, man.
This has been a great start to the podcast. I mean, just hearing the stories, and it really gets to the point of what I was saying earlier, which is the why. Which is, I love the way you tell a story, because a lot of times a story can be told in a matter of chronological events, right? Dates, how many people, how many employees, how many knives, and when and where. Whereas,
what kind of steel are you using?
Yeah. Where's the why? I feel like we've gathered a lot of why from you on the first, series of starting the knife company.
Yeah.
all that. So I appreciate it. This is great.
Oh,
And
well,
it's the stuff around the edges, right? That
Mhm.
gives
Yeah.
color to what we do. And you're linking it in now. We're talking about community. You had said early on, I can't even remember if you were recording, but you kind of said, rising tide raises all vessels. And you're showing that in the company as well. And I think with manufacturing business, there's so many, and especially in an industry where you have like artisans, right? Custom knife maker artisans, there's preconceived notions around scale and big business and companies and manufacturing. And a lot of that, I think, harkens back to times where like employees were just a commodity, where owners were not necessarily looking to like better them as humans, give them better opportunities, to the point where maybe they even leave and go do something different with a new skill set. That, to me, like I always say, I love knives, I love making knives, but I love the game of knife. That right there is like the beautiful game of knife. Like you're just giving people opportunity. It's rad.
Well, it's funny too, because having the company, I'm kind of a hands-on guy, and I've actually had a number of the employees just in casual conversation say, I've never worked at a job where the boss is actually standing next to me on a drill press.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you know what? I'm a worker. I really am. That's where I thrive.
Yeah.
Is
Lead from the
working.
front.
Yeah. Now, look, you know what? I forgot. There's an end story to that bally song made by Pacific Cutlery.
Ooh.
So you fast forward a few years, and I'm at the California Custom Knife Show now as a custom knife maker, making some knives and selling them, and kind of climbing up the ladder, having some fun. And these three guys step up to my table, and they're all kind of long-haired, scruffy-looking characters, but I could tell these guys are pretty. They're trim and athletic. Let's just say that. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. What can I help you with? And one of the guys said, well, we're underwater welders, and we're looking for a knife that we could use underwater, and we could use it to scrape metal clean and things like that, scrape off barnacles, whatever. They described some things to me that they needed to do with the knife and everything. And I said, okay, I don't think I have anything like that, but we could probably make something like that. So they gave me the kind of their basic parameters, which were no more than just telling me it had to have a, this long and blade this long, and comfortable handle with some grip on it and all this other stuff. And I said, well, I'll take a look at what I could maybe conjure up, and let's see if we could make something. And they said, that's okay. Here's a number. Just call it when you're ready to show us something. And it was a 619 area code, which if you're out here in California, 619 San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, a long time goes by, and I developed this knife that became what was called the CQC6. And we went through several iterations, kind of refining it. It's too short, it's too bulky, it's too this or whatever. There was a whole bunch of stuff. And then finally, they were like, okay, this is cool. I like this design. This is something we can use. Can you make us a dozen of them? I think I made 18 of them or something like that. And they said, we'll just come up to your house. Just let us know when it's ready. We'll come up. And so the main guy, let's call him Charlie, he showed up with a couple of different buddies, and at my garage. And they said, well, Ernie, first thing I got to tell you is we've been having this conversation now for going on a year. We're not really underwater welders. And I go, okay. He goes, yeah, we haven't been real forthright with you about what we actually do. We're in the military. And I said, oh, okay. And they said, but we're in the Navy. We're Navy SEALs. And I was like, no kidding. That is awesome, because at that time, still a lot of people really didn't know a lot about the Navy SEALs.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, but we'd like to work with you, and we'd like to keep doing this kind of stuff, and et cetera, et cetera. So that happened which kind of was, and again, admittedly, the guy in Kansas who wants the knife that the Navy SEALs were using. So it was one of those kind of things that was another big turning point in my knife making career. But what also happened was there was a guy at Benchmade named Mark McWillis, and he was he was like chief of operations at the time. And they were down at, I think it was an AUSA show or something down in Florida. And I get a phone call from the from the show floor. And it's this guy named Mark. And he says, Mr. Emerson, I want to see if you'd like to come up and visit us up in, gosh, was it Clackamas or something? It was up in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I'm down here at the show, and these guys keep coming up and they keep showing this knife to me because we've got a Benchmade knife booth down here, and we'd like to talk to you about maybe licensing the design. So I said, oh, okay, that's cool.
What year would this have been, ballpark?
I'm thinking maybe 90, 91, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, after all was said and done, they flew me up with my wife to Benchmade. And lo and behold, I'm in the office with Les and Roberta discussing, doing a knife design for them. And I was sitting there going, you know what? I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't even know me from anyone in the world if I couldn't afford to buy one of your knives when you were Pacific Cutlery, which made me decide to start making knives. And now I'm here, 25 years later or whatever. And I said, man, this is just I'm in dreamland,
Yeah.
And so they wanted to make the CQC6, and I said, no, that's my flagship knife. But I've got another design that I think will fill the bill. And then I drew out the CQC7 for him. And honest to gosh, later that was like 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that. But we went out to eat that night, and a guy showed up at the restaurant, and he had a prototype CQC7 that they had made that afternoon. Wasn't heat treated.
Wow.
And I was like,
got right on it.
It was awesome. And then of course that led to exposure with, Benchmade, putting my name on advertising and stuff like that. So
we got to draw a big circle. We got to stop because my brain's about to explode because there's a whole lot of questions that I have.
Sure.
That are just like right in this time. Okay. TJ, yeah. I want to give you a chance to, man, because I'm about to let's go off, I think. Anything that you want to talk about quick?
The only thing I wanted to point out is that's, to me, and tell me if this is accurate, Ernest, that's very early in the era of bigger companies licensing custom designs. Would you agree? That was almost unheard of.
Yeah. Benchmade, I think, was the kind of the pioneer in identifying that.
So that would have been around that time, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because they were working. I think Walter Brand was one of the guys who had designed a knife for them. I can't remember who else was in there. Oh, Chris Karachi, who was a plank owner with Six, who I ended up working with for the next 15 years or so, actually. Unrelated to Benchmade, but to some other stuff. But that was when that was kind of coming into being.
At this point, they're Benchmade, not Pacific. Mm-hmm. Okay, so where I want to dig in a little bit is this transition from custom knife maker, okay, fully feeding your family on things that you are producing by yourself, okay. Then you're moving into factory collaboration, and then at some point you're starting to do some bigger numbers yourself. So one thing I wanted to ask is, and I think maybe this has kind of been answered a little bit, is you hear pre-tack, right? Mm-hmm. So up until a point, like I'm familiar with knives that kind of fell into that pre-tack category. I think I'm thinking liner locks and stuff that you were doing anodizing, you're doing cool milling on bolsters. So kind of the time, but very Emerson even then. What was before that? Like model wise, were there consecutive models or things that you were making consistently that were kind of before that timeline?
Yeah, I had I of course being inspired by both Mel and Michael Walker and a couple of the other guys. Uh, I although I was making a lot of one-off stuff just because
Mm-hmm.
you're creative and I didn't have a full portfolio of things at the time. But the I had, I think, in my original Xeroxed copy catalog, if you will, I think I had settled on about 7 or 8 kind of basic designs, and then just fancied them up with stag handle, and on one with pearl, and then the same model with a Damascus blade or something. But there was about maybe 8 or 9 knives that I kind of made on an ongoing
Mm-hmm. And these are
basis.
folders, fixed,
All
combination.
Well, folders, because at that time, that's what the public was after.
Right.
At least the people that took an interest in my work, they wanted folders and
It's
they
never
wanted liner
changed,
locks. Yeah, it never has.
you
Mm-hmm.
And
know?
they wanted the fancy stuff and all that. And I never aspired to be someone like Michael Walker or some of those guys, but I just wanted to make a good knife. But see, remember, I grew up on a farm, and the tool was a tool. And I came from a really, again, another side story, but I was born and raised in a 20 by 30-foot log cabin that my grandfather built for my mom and dad for their wedding gift. And so we had very little means at that time. I wouldn't say we were poor because my dad worked and my mom worked, but tools were not, they were important things, and you treated them well, but they were just a tool, and they weren't fancy, and they didn't have, an Estwing hammer is an Estwing hammer, and
Yeah.
I have my grandfather's Estwing hammers over
Yeah.
100 plus years old.
The concept of tools as art hadn't quite taken hold
No,
yet.
I
Yeah.
But
I
it's funny
liked.
because an Est wing it actually hits, for me, that hits a point where in and of itself, it's attractive.
Oh
It
yeah.
wasn't just the bare
No, it's
bones
a good
tool.
looking,
It's a good looking
good
tool,
looking
which
thing.
carries over, right?
Yeah.
Just not fancy, but
No, it isn't. And the so even though I was making what would call now the pre-tack were fancied up knives, my heart, that wasn't my heart. That's
mm-hmm,
not why. Remember, I started out making a weapon for Filipino knife
mm-hmm,
fighters. Uh, and so I loved doing it. It was fun. It was really cool to get a nice, brilliant, you know, mirror polish and then anodize it and see all that cool colors and all that. But it wasn't really my heart wasn't in it.
yeah,
I was doing it because that's what, as a knife maker, I needed to. I always tell people, look, if you make a size 28 shoe and it's the best shoe in the world, you're not going to sell very many of them.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
got to make a shoe that someone can actually use and wear, and it fits most people. So that's at that time, that was when the underwater welders kind of appeared in my world.
And
And
you found the
yeah,
hook. You're
okay, these
like,
guys
oh,
want
these now
tools. Yeah,
they want tools. Here's my skill set that I'm tying in.
yeah,
It's tying into your mentality, and you found the thing.
that's exactly
Okay.
what happened. That was
Second,
another kind of take a
oh,
right hand
formative.
turn. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the nice thing is these are objects in motion issues, right? If you were at a point and had a background that when they stopped at your table, I mean, you're at the California Custom Show, they could stop at any table. You already had ethos, design language, application that they recognize. And that's, it's funny. My background in knives, I love tactical knives too. And it came
Mhm.
out of the time where I was doing all this combative training. And my thing was like, I don't need to make it look super aggressive because the people that know what I'm designing it for, they're going to understand it anyway.
Yep.
They walked to your table because they understood what you were doing. And
Well,
love it.
I hope that was
Mhm.
the case.
Yeah.
I was very lucky. I've always assigned it to just being in the right place at the right time, and God or whoever just happened to say, I think I'm going to hook these two people up or whatever.
Timing's everything, but I still think they either like you They saw you and liked you, felt a connection. And that's the thing. Cause we know you're buying the person as much as the thing that we make.
Oh yeah.
Right.
100%.
So
100%.
but that just as like it's just that's a little turn. That's not a major shift, but it's enough that it changed what you were making in a way that you liked it more. How cool is that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like, if you're a rock and roller and someone wants you to do, mood music, it's like, you might be able to do it, but man, when you go home at night, you plug in and play rock and roll. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Funny, here's a small tangent that I love. Mutual friend Derek Obatake from Steel Flame.
Oh yeah.
He's a great example of this, because when you look at like the old work and you look at like Lucienne and you look at like these things that tie into business, and then you look at when he got the chance to really just like, man, there's a shift. And I just, what I really want to do, I want to carve skulls and I want to make big badass jewelry. That's that same trajectory shift.
Yeah.
Same. You're doing the same work. The work is there. It's just that the outcome and the intention behind it gets to fit you better.
Yeah. Well, there's a lesson in that, I think, with aligning what you're trying to do with what you would actually desire. You know what I mean? Because to your point, I mean, making something to fit a market that doesn't fit the market you would be a buyer in, it can work, but to be exceptional, if there's an alignment between what kind of product you would want and the kind of product you're making, you have a further reach and a better long-term future.
And you're honest about it too.
Yeah.
Your passion
is just
there.
Be excited.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to have to sell something ever.
Yeah.
People ask me like, why do I need this? I'm like, you don't.
Yeah.
If you don't understand it enough that you need it, you definitely don't need it.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I always, the stance that I always take is, I know no one ever needs to buy an Emerson knife. I mean, that's a fact, because I can go, or you or anybody can go over to the hardware store and buy a $19, $15 knife, and it'll probably serve you pretty damn well for whatever you really need to do. So those people, they're making an investment in something that you have created for whatever reasons, including the emotional attachment to some of these things. Because you look at things and some of them just go, I got to have that, whatever it is, whether it's a gun or a new table saw or whatever. It's like, oh man,
it's emotional.
And you can't ever lose sight of that, because those are the people who are allowing you to do what you love to do.
That's the key right there. They allow us, they give us the ability 100%. To take care of our families, to contribute to, like, it's, man, I love hearing that. Yeah.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, this is another kind of side story, but I was working with a friend. He became a good friend of mine. God, I can't remember his name because it's been about 12 or 15 years, but he had a company called Backyard Outfitters. Was a Cuban guy, was just salt of the earth, tactical guy, making all these backpacks. Remember when there was Eagle Industries, and 511 didn't even exist. Mike Knoll and Blackhawk Industries and all this and that. Those were like the main major tactical gear companies that started up. And he had a really good one because he was ready to do some things out of the box and stuff like that. And so we hooked up and did a lot of stuff. And I got him a lot of gear from a lot of special forces units and all that we were familiar with and knew people. And so they produced all this good stuff. And lo and behold, along comes a company called Woolrich. Now, Woolrich actually made uniforms for both the North and the South during the Civil War. That's how long. That's how long they go back into this. And so he invited me when Woolrich was still using him as a figurehead for his company. They bought his company, and of course he stayed on as the the main guy in the tactical stuff, because they wanted to move into the tactical arena because they saw a market niche there that they were going to try and move into. Excuse me. And so he invited me along to one of the meetings when they were discussing the future of Backyard Outfitters designs in the Woolrich catalogs. And I was talking to this guy who was a VP of Woolrich and some other people that were at the meeting. And I said, I think that what people don't understand about, you know, you can go to the store and I like the color of that shirt, I'm going to buy it. That's cool. Or you can go to the Best Buy and, okay, that TV looks pretty good, I'm going to buy it. But you don't have any emotional attachment to it. You don't identify with it. You don't want to know about it.
Just a commodity.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I told this guy, I said, look, here's the deal. When it comes to tactical gear, including guns and knives and everything that goes into it, from the shoelaces you use all the way to what you put on your cap. And I said, you have to understand that in the tactical world, when I buy a gun belt, I'm buying that with the knowledge that it's got to serve me in the worst case scenario when I'm in a jam and I've got to have that gun belt not, you know, come apart, or it's got to support my weapon carry to where it's not uncomfortable, etc. Everything to your boots. And at that time, Danner boots were the big thing and all that. But I said, there's an emotional attachment that goes along with that item that you're producing that doesn't exist in other industries. Maybe in the guitars and things like that, because again, the guitar speaks to me. That's the one I want to have, you know. But those are niche kind of things that don't exist overall. And I was telling him that. I said, so you've got to understand that when someone's putting their life on the line, carrying something that you produced, there's an emotional attachment to that product. They've made a decision. They can buy other stuff, but they decided this one was the one they wanted.
There's a trust buy-in at the
that's the
outset.
word, the trust. Yeah. And I was telling him about this, so I said, I think you should approach it from that viewpoint. And the guy looked at me, and it was weird because he said, what school did you go to? And I was like, why does he care where I graduate? And I said, I went to the University of Wisconsin. He goes, oh, in Madison? I go, no, La Crosse. It was a state college. And he goes, oh, okay. Now I see it. And I was like, why is all of a sudden there's this big dismissive attitude coming out of you like in full force? And I said, I'm sorry, did I say something to, you know, offend you or something? He goes, no. He goes, we've got people that really know how to market product and everything. So thanks for your advice.
Oh.
Now, really, honest to God, and my buddy, God, I can't remember, Carlos or whatever his name was, he looked at me and he was like, fucking guy really disrespect. I could see what was in his mind. He was going, fucking really disrespected you there. And I said, you know what? It doesn't matter. So sale went through and all that, but here's the deal. About 6 months later, falls to pieces. They farmed it out to China. They used a thinner material for the pants and for the gear. They used a thinner thread for the stitches. They expanded the stitch line, so rather than 30 stitches per inch, it was like 20 or 10 or whatever, and shit started falling apart and everything. And boom, within a year, there was no more tactical part of Woolrich. And I thought, you know what? I'm just telling you from experience, man. I don't. That's
not marketing.
Why,
that's the thing that some people don't get. It's not marketing.
No, it isn't. Yeah. But on top of that, it's like every person that steps up to my booth when I'm at a trade show or something, he may teach me something that I never ever even thought of. Yeah. So you know what? Every single time that I speak to somebody, it's like, dude, this is awesome, because I learned everything that I know. I learned from someone else. I didn't sit and have a one of those crystal balls or whatever and figure this shit out. So it was just one of those things where it's like, again, it was just hammering the fact home to me. It's like, I'm never going to be that guy, period.
Yeah.
You know,
Man.
he thinks he's good because he's got some MBD, A, C, D,
I
E,
got no
E
letters.
degree.
Sorry.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
dude, you know, so again, that's part of the, you know, you learn stuff over the years. And I don't think my personality, that didn't change me into who I was, but it was just an affirmation or a confirmation, excuse me, that, you know, you treat people with respect, and everybody's got something that you can learn from. It doesn't matter who they are. So I heard of this is another story, just unrelated, but um, there was a gal, I think it was called I'm going to make it up, but it's close. It's like the Harriet Jones catalog or something like that. They used to come in the mail, and it was this little catalog about this big, but it was everything from jar opening things, if you have arthritis, to
I know what you're talking about,
steamer
actually, and
for
I
to clean. It
can't
was
think of the name.
everything, all kinds of stuff. And I actually saw her. I never met her, but she wore sweatpants and tennis shoes and just some loose fitting blouse. And she would come up, she'd be at all these different trade shows. She was at the SHOT Show a few times, I guess, looking for things that might relate to the. She didn't have tactical stuff, but there might be a
Mhm.
new bootlace tightener that no one ever had. And so some guys uh, mentioned it. I was at their booth. I can't remember what company it was, but they said, yeah, this lady came up. She wanted to have all these questions and all that. And I looked at her and I said, God, she's wearing tennis shoes and sweatpants. And I just blew her off. And the guy said, do you know who the hell that was? That's one of the like biggest mail order catalogs in the entire world. And you blew her off, and they might have been interested in having something that, you know, what we
Yeah.
make, the eyeglass cleaner or whatever the hell it was. So, you know, you never know who you're talking to.
Yeah. That's a
And
fact.
so if you treat everybody with respect, you're going to cover all your
It's
bases
just
with
a
it. You know?
good, we always say like rule one, don't be a dick.
Oh
It's real
man.
easy. Like if you just start there, you're way ahead. You
Hell
know,
yeah.
it's funny. Knife industry is really falls into that category of not knowing who you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, like you get, Ron Appleton walk up to your table and he could be a new maker. And you're like, man, this is like crunchy old hippie guy. Like, I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know who it is. You don't know the collectors. And not that that's the reason to be respectful, but it's amazing to me that we still see people who aren't
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
or like get ahead of themselves or, start to kind of buy into their own hype. And you said it, right? Which
Yeah.
is we wouldn't be here. I can make anything I want for myself and my friends
Yeah.
and my family. And I wouldn't be able to support myself or my family
Yeah.
if it
Yeah.
wasn't for the industry and our collectors. And I mean,
It's a
where
precious
does that
gift, man.
exist? It
It is.
is a
It's a
gift.
precious gift.
Yeah.
I mean, how lucky are we? I mean, honest, think about it.
Yeah.
You know, most people they punch in and punch out, and they lead a life of. I'm not putting people down, but it's everyone has aspirations to do better, to be better, to have opportunities and things, and a lot of people are denied that only because they have just however life has led them to like a 9 to 5 job that they just got to punch in and punch out. And some of it has to do with lack of personal motivation and things like that. Uh, but at the same time, some people are highly motivated and they just can't break free from that,
Yeah.
and they want to. You know, it's in man's spirit to aspire to greater heights and things like that. And we're lucky that we've got that opportunity. It was given to us. It's a gift.
I know it's a gift. And that's the thing. I think that like TJ and I talk about this a lot because as we're going through this and figuring it out and raising families and making business decisions, it's like a lot of what we just try to come back to is that gratitude is like, it's the why, right? So this actually is a great segue a little bit.
Mhm.
I want to ask a couple more questions because we
Sure.
got into collaboration. Okay. So there's two eras. So your first collaboration was with Benchmade.
That is almost true.
It's almost true because I feel like I see some areas in here, so I want to dig into this.
The actual first one was the Spec War fixed blade
Timberline
with Timberline. Yeah.
Okay, that was gonna be my second question. So dig in.
Yeah. Because the same guys that wanted a big fixed blade.
Yep.
And at that time there was a knife maker. He's still around, I believe. Mad Dog McClung.
Yep.
And
01.
Yeah.
01 tool steel, everything nickel plated.
Yeah. Simple yet effective. And by the way, people, the whole super steel thing, I got it. There's some steels that have characteristics that are maybe better, but they
Can I tangent for 1 second? Only because you mentioned him. The first knife show I ever did was it was a little show in Arizona. And I think it might have been the only time they did. It was Paul Bosch. Okay.
Yeah.
It's my first show. Drove my car out from New Mexico.
He's
a great dude.
Yeah.
All I was trying to do was make enough gas money to get home. Two things from that show. McClung was there. Every knife on my table was 01.
Mm-hmm.
He came by and he talked to me and he loved that I was using 01.
Yep.
And at that point, this is forum era. He went back to his forum and name dropped me. And it was a
That's awesome
boost. It is awesome. And that doesn't happen. And he's not maybe the type that's doing that for everybody. So, it feels really good. Right. Yeah, man, that just hearing his name again. Brought back a lot of memories.
Yeah. All right. He was a character. Let's just say that. But there was he was a great knife maker, and he did everything for a purpose. Yep. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
It wasn't for looks. It wasn't for fun. It wasn't for fancy. It either worked or not. And his knives were virtually unbreakable. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Mad Dog was making a bunch of knives for the Navy teams and all that, and they actually used a cold steel knife a lot, especially in training. And of course, they had the Navy Mark II dive knife that they used and all that. But they wanted, it's like a lot of groups, they want a knife that's made for them, that has their flavor to it, if you will. And so they had, at the time, because this is not so much known by a lot of people, but I had some very dear friends in naval special warfare, and I was able to go down to the base anytime I wanted, and they'd wave me through, and I could go in and talk to some of the guys. And I became good friends with a guy named Nick North, who was the RTD&E officer, he was responsible for all research, technology development, and all of that good stuff. And so he said, "Hey, we're thinking about having a out for bid knife development for the team's fixed blade. It had to fit certain parameters, which the handle had to be insulated from the blade in case it contacted electrical wires. It had to be saltwater resistant, etc. A whole bunch of different things, and it had to have an end that they could really hammer things with and wouldn't damage it and all that." And it's funny because I was making some fixed blades for some of the guys who had contacted me auxiliary to that. And so I already had some knife designs that were being used by just individuals that were on the teams. And so I said, "Yeah, I'd love to be part of that." So he said, "Okay, cool. We'll put you in the bidding pool." And so I went home and designed the Spec War knife according to their parameters, length, weight, all of those good things. And the time came to have the bid bought off. And this is a funny story because we were all excited that maybe we could make the official knife for the Navy SEALs and all that good stuff. And a guy came in. It came down to one guy. They had about 5 or 6 knives on the table. Buck was in it. Sog was in it. Mad Dog was in it. I was in it. Maybe somebody else, I don't know. And he was an ex. Of course, he's a Navy SEAL, but he was a Vietnam vet. And as you know, the knife that a lot of the guys used in Vietnam was the what the hell is the name of it? It was it was like a buoy, but it had a couple of.
It was essentially the SOG again. Now this is one I know exactly the model. I'm trying to think of the name, and I'm going to get shit for this later. But I know exactly.
I actually have a couple of them.
Yeah,
that were given to me, and I can't even think of the name. So I'm with you. So anyway, he walked in, and honest to God, that Nick told me the whole story. He goes, he looked over the table, he picked my knife up, which was a chisel ground Tonto, and he goes, "What the fuck is this?" And put it back down. And he went over, and SOG had their knife, which was a copy, which I'm not saying that they copied, in a bad way, but it was the Special Operations Group knife. And he looked at it and he goes, "That's the one right there." And then he walked out.
That was it. Traditionalist.
Yeah, because that was his knife that he used when he was probably in Special Operations Group. Or
worked then, works now. Well, in the spec
Mac
war
v SOG. Mac v SOG. That was what
the Mac v. Yep. Okay. Oh
so,
man, classic.
Anyway, I missed it, but at the same time, Vaughn Neely from Timberline, who was paying attention to a lot of this stuff, because he had contacted me about doing a collaboration, and I told him about the Navy SEAL competition, if you will, and I said, "Vaughn, I can't make if they order 700 knives, I can't do this, but I got to do this. I got to do this." And he goes, "Well, Timberline, we'll make them for you." So then Vaughn and I became friends, and he ended up helping us get some things done in the early prototypes and all this and that. And we missed the contract, but he said, "Ernie, that knife, I want to make that knife no matter what. So let's make it, and we'll just sell it as the Timberline Spec War." And I go,
"And that knife was so radical.
Fine on me."
It was so good. Yeah.
So that was the actual first collaboration that actually came to fruition, and then Benchmade followed shortly behind, because they were almost kind of running.
And you were custom only at this point. So at this point, you're no employees. It's you in your shop.
It was just me in my shop.
It's you in your shop.
Garage.
Yeah. So, okay. So Timberline was there. Who are the three primaries of Timberline? Was Vaughn Neely, Bill?
Vaughn Neely, Bill, he passed away.
I spent some time, at shows. I spent time next to him at a table in the early 2000s. He made the cool knife with the scales came off, a little survival kit inside. Hunting knives, but you could see it's just this cool little tactical, real tough, but classic also. And then there was one more, right? It was three, wasn't it? 3 partners.
Well, there was only 2 that I was ever.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
Vaughn and Bill.
Bill.
God, can't think of his last name. I feel bad. But they were the first ones to I guess take one of my designs and go beyond the one at a time handmade.
So that was when this is happening, are you seeing this as an option? Are you seeing, oh man, they're paying me. I'm assuming you probably got a royalty, right? Not like a one-time payout or okay.
No,
so you're getting a royalty and you're like, oh, that's pretty good. Wow. Yeah. Make it once and get paid more than once.
Get paid great. Again and again.
Yeah. So are you seeing this as something you're going to pursue, or was it just kind of a one-off at that point?
I didn't really, I'll be real frank with you. I didn't really understand the knife business at that time. I was just a guy doing stuff in my garage, and I was elated that someone else took an interest in it, kind of thing. And that actually also carried over into when the Benchmade collaboration came to and all that. I still was like, wow, these guys contacted me. I'm like, I didn't have the cojones, let's say, to approach somebody like a Gerber or Shaw and say, hey,
we also didn't know.
I didn't know anything about it. And I wouldn't have probably ever done that anyway, but they had contacted me, and I was just, I guess lucky enough to be someone that they took an interest in, and they made the knives. And so I didn't look at it as like I was going to see. That's the thing. I didn't know there were collaborations at the time. Granted, I knew Gil Hibben and his stuff was being made by whatever United.
Yeah, United Cutler. He was one. I mean, the Edge catalog and looking at Gil Hibben stuff. Some of those were just seeing oh man, this guy like, okay, he does this, and then okay, he makes knives, but then he's doing this, and you got,
Yeah.
you've got Lyle doing Rambo knives. I mean,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
things that are happening, but it's not commonplace.
They're
It's not
happening for the
industry.
first time.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, there might have been guys in the past, but they were kind of singular.
Yeah.
But it was catching steam,
Mm-hmm.
and knife companies were recognizing that a graphic artist does not design as good a knife
Right.
as a knife maker from
Yeah.
Alabama or from Utah who goes out and
Sure.
hunts, or a guy who's, you know what I'm saying? They
Mm-hmm.
really know about knives, and they're making knives that are functional for them and for what the purposes that they're being designed for.
Yeah.
And so I think, like I said, I think Benchmade was one of the first ones to really recognize the cachet that these real knife makers brought to the table. Now, granted, the Jody Sampson was also
Yep.
working with Benchmade at that time, and Jody
Classic.
was a consummate knife
Yeah.
designer and a knife maker. All of his stuff always appealed to me too, because I was a weapons guy at that.
Yeah.
That was my thing.
You still are.
Yeah,
So
I really I
I
am.
don't care what you make. It's still in there.
so from this early 90s story here with the design, how far forward do we have to fast forward to go to the Kershaw and the zero tolerance stuff for you? When did
Ooh, we got to dig into Benchmade though more. I want to know
okay.
more
Sure.
because I want to know some. I'm trying to think of models, and this for me really ties into you starting to go into manufacturing and knives like the Raven, and like some of the decisions around that, and like what you were seeing, because everything, I think everything runs in cycles, and like right now it's really interesting seeing the cycles of how knife making is happening, collaboration, and then production. And it's like there's just these huge shifts. And it's really strange. Inside of my 22 years, you're seeing another, 20 years or something close to that on top of mine. And I like that. I want the parallels kind of. So you're in Benchmade, you get this first model in, right?
Yeah, I'm going to write something down before I
Okay.
forget it.
Yeah.
Custom to production to production customs, which is that's an interesting evolution
Yeah.
I want to talk about, because
Yeah.
it makes a statement about why the industry has changed so much. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So you're in Benchmade. So this is now basically you've got your designs inside a machine with horsepower, right? You're still
Yep.
custom making. This is now, you're not doing the pre-tack stuff. So you're kind of making tactical stuff. You're
Yep.
doing shows. It's still just you. Now you're working with Benchmade. What is that timeline of Benchmade, and like just model wise, how many models were in there? And
Well, there was only the CQC7, but they made a larger version.
yep.
And they also made some with titanium blades and all that. But it was only
Right.
it really was one design
One
overall.
design skewed out.
Yeah.
And what timeline, how long did that model run?
That ran for maybe 2 or 3 years. And I'll tell you, God, I got to write this down or I'm going to forget.
I love it.
I'm going to write down end of Benchmade, because that's a little story.
Okay.
But I remember Les telling me when I went there, they had pretty much the same amount of employees that I have right now, about 25, 30 people, let's say,
Okay.
and working a single shift. And Les went from single shift to 2 shifts, night shift, in about 3 months to produce the CQC7. And after about another 3 or 4 months, they ended up going to 3 shifts.
Wow.
On top of their own production, but it was basically because of the CQC7, and it was just going crazy.
Well, you
And
hit a time period with that knife. That was a shift, right? That was a shift, and it was badass and angular, right? That was zero ground, right? Or right, chisel ground,
It was flat ground to a chisel, but it had a chisel
but
edge.
secondary bevel. But it
Yes,
had
yeah.
that visual, and at
Yeah.
that point, that's you, right?
That was
like,
me.
I mean, you got Phil Hartsfield, it's got some guys like
Yeah.
doing stuff, but you're essentially, it's the horsepower thing again. Now you have the style, the backstory, and the production capacity. That's amazing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that just supercharger.
Well, you mentioned Phil Hartsfield. God love him. I called him because when I was working with those underwater welders, they had purchased some of Phil's knives, which was actually, they wanted a folder that had the chisel grind like this knife made by this guy named Phil Hartsfield. And so I called Phil. I knew who he was, but I'd never, shook hands with him and knew him. And I called him up and I said, Mr. Hartsfield, and I explained to him what was going on and everything. And I said, would you be offended, or could I have your permission to make a folding knife with a chisel grind on it? And he said, well, he goes, Ernie, it is my kind of signature thing, but I don't make folders. So, you know what, I'm fine with you doing that. And I know who they're going to. He already knew these guys and who they were. And he said, but I got to tell you, you're the first person that's ever asked me permission to do something like this. And I said, well, I wouldn't do it if you said no, and I wouldn't have done it unless I got your permission. And he said, so go right ahead and do it. So that happened before the CQC6 and the chisel ground folder became something. But I got to tell you the other thing, when I started making knives as a custom knife maker, this dealer was the #1 dealer that existed for Michael Walker's folders. And he was the guy that said, Ernie, I'll buy all your knives.
Who was the dealer?
Mark, maybe it'll pop in my head as we talk.
Yeah,
I just yell out somebody's name. That's the
guy.
Anyway, he was also the #1 dealer for Mel Pardue and and the liner locks in general, so to speak. He said, Ernie, I want you to make some liner locks and all that. And I said, well, I don't really know a lot about them. And I said, isn't that like Michael Walker's thing? And he goes, yeah. He goes, it is. And I said, well, I need to talk to Michael Walker. So I did the same thing. This was before Phil, but I called Michael and I asked him about the knife. And he said, well, he goes, I can see what's coming, because I should have gotten a patent on that damn mechanism. But he goes, Ernie, you're asking me my permission. And he goes, he said the same thing. You're the only guy who ever asked me if you could make it, the liner lock. And I said, well, Michael, I won't do it if it's something that offends you, or or whatever. And he goes, no, you can go right ahead and make them.
Man.
And Michael will tell you, Michael will tell you that story. So, he's, and so anyway, back to the Hartsfield thing. We designed that CQC6 with the chisel grind, a full chisel, because Phil's were full chisel also. And if you look at Phil, what he did, again, they were tools.
Yeah.
They were weapons / tools.
Yeah.
And because he made swords and everything else, but there was nothing fancy. In fact, one of my buddies one time said that's an I-40 finish that he's got on there.
40 grit Phil.
Throw it out on the freeway and let cars run over it for a while. And I said, I got it. I understand what he's doing. But anyway, back to your question. I can't remember where we were going.
On the finish, this is a funny one. A while back, I started seeing a lot of custom knives where I'm like, that's a 60 grit finish. And it's 60 grit and then it's blasted and tumbled, or it's acid etched, or it's coated, but that's 60 grit. And I realized like my years were kicking in, because I'm like, I spent so much time trying to hide that. I did a poll we got a big Facebook group, right? It's probably 10,000 people. I did a poll. I said, hey, you guys like this rough finish or this fine finish? Overwhelmingly, people were like, "Oh man, on a user, I want that coarse finish because I'm not
Mhm.
scared to use it, and it looks tough." And I was like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love it. And I started doing some of them, and I was like, "Man, that's great."
I'm with you,
120
man.
grit. I feel good at
Yeah.
120,
Mm.
but
Well,
it was so interesting.
it's like the stonewashed jean trend, you know what I mean? In
Yeah.
a way, it's
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Spent
Pretty
so much
Looking the
time
part.
trying to make it nice.
Yeah.
Mm.
I know. In fact, it's funny because I just talked to Walter Brand at the last
Oh
Blade
yeah.
show, and he said he introduced me to his daughter, and she said, "I'm the one who did all the satin finishes on all my dad's knives." And I said, "Well, I really feel sorry that you that you had to do that." And Walter
Mhm.
laughed, and he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "if he goes, I never should have gone to having those nice satin finishes on my blades because he said I would have made a lot more knives and my poor daughter wouldn't have wore her fingers to the bone."
Man,
We had a big laugh.
he was another of my really early inspirations were the grinds he did, these big swooping grinds.
Yeah,
I saw it and I was like, I designed that way because I
yeah,
was like, it's so beautiful. And it
yeah.
was,
Walter's a.
I mean,
I don't
oh,
think he ever got the credit that he was due
yeah,
for what he did
yeah.
in the
Jim
knife.
Siska, I guess, is in there too. Jim Siska
Yeah,
had those big swoopy
yeah.
grinds, and they're kind of out of that, some of that like Kronk era 80s and Bill
Mhm.
Luckett's and stuff like that. But I love that style. And it still exists, but it's definitely, you just don't see it as much anymore.
Yeah.
Beautiful though.
Oh, I know where we're kind of going with the
Bring it
Benchmade and
back.
the collaborations.
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
What happened was we were at a shot show and Les made a big mistake. He came up to me in the middle of everything. He said, "Ernie, I got to shake your hand." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "You made me $1 million last year." And I was
Wow.
like, "Wow, that's awesome." But in my head, I was going, "Dang, he made $1 million.
Yeah.
I didn't make $1 million."
Mhm.
And at that point, I thought, because I had been pushing on Benchmade to do, I wanted them to do the Commander and a couple of other designs that I had, and they said, "Ernie, we can't become the Emerson Knife Company. We're Benchmade, so we
Two
cannot
things.
can't lose our identity." And I said, "Okay, fair enough, that's fine. I'll make them as customs and all that." But then when he said that to me, I thought, "Where's my wife? Because I gotta talk to her because I gotta tell her, honey, we gotta have a knife company."
Yeah.
Because making them one at a time at home, that puts bread on the table and a roof over, but it doesn't allow me to produce the knives because we knew at that point, and with all due respect to Benchmade, they really opened the world's doors
Right.
for my name,
Yeah.
and I knew that we had a worldwide interest in the knives because I was looking at all the groups. I mean, a lot of military groups from all over the entire world were buying uh, quantities of those knives, and individuals were buying those knives. And I thought, wow, if we had a company that could produce my designs, um, maybe we could sell more of them and expand ourselves into that. So at that point, I made the decision, really kind of almost on the spot, that we needed to open up a knife company, a
Mhm.
production facility. And so that's really all that happened. I said, "You know what, guys, we're opening our own company." It raised some feathers, that's for sure, with Benchmade.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, we'll transition out of it. And we all parted ways and off we went.
And
And
this
they're
was
highly
what
successful.
year
And
would this have been?
mid 90s, 90s. We opened our company in 1997.
Okay.
That's when we incorporated and created the company. So
Mhm.
late 96, probably.
And when you did this, you stopped that collaboration. It was still running.
Hmm.
You put a stop on that. One, those numbers, right? You're pulling a royalty. That also is hitting you because you're feeling those numbers too. You're just
Yeah.
not feeling it at the top line,
Yeah.
which any designer who's designed for a company has looked at the numbers
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
and you go, wow, that's a lot. Okay.
Which, that's the way it is. We got to
Yep.
accept it.
And
Mhm.
this is another thing. So I've designed with CRKT since 2013. And when I got that collaboration, I was like getting picked up. The only way I would phrase it is like you get playing for the bigs. Like I was buying their knives when I was a teenager, and now I'm designing for them. And it's the same as with our customers. Like I look at it and I'm like, I'm just grateful. Like they didn't know me anything. And I was a kid when I got in. They took a chance. And so it's a really interesting maker company dynamic, right? Okay. So you make a hard decision, and it's twofold, because one, you're leaving something that's working, and then you're going off into the unknown, but it's blue sky. What did the company start as? Like, so what, like day one, your Ernest Emerson custom knives, right? What is day one of the company look like?
Well, at that time, we had to do a lot of finding vendors that could produce parts for us. And we needed a laser cutting facility.
Yep.
Vendor. We needed heat treating, because I'm in my garage, I'm looking at a little tiny heat treating oven that's like, you could put a dictionary in it, but that's about it. Yeah. And all of the different things, the grinding, I couldn't grind, 2,000 knives and things like that. And a whole bunch of those other things were going on. And so the beginning of the company was like, how are we going to do this? And so I just sat down and contacted people. I was in a crazy good spot because most of them knew who I was. So I didn't have to say, would you
have to sell yourself,
you consider doing this? Yeah. And so that's how we started out. I was real lucky and became really good friends with Blue Ridge Knives. And they told me they'd take they would take our entire first run of knives.
Right. So you have a little bit of an insurance policy.
It was a big insurance policy. And so anyway, what we did when we started getting parts back, I sharpened everything because they were ground, but they weren't sharpened, and got them logoed. This was local type stuff. There's a laser logo guy who did them for us and all this and that. Anyway, I was working with Walter Birdsong down in Mississippi for black tea coating and everything. And but the knife company was our house, my garage and our house. And this is a funny thing, because one of our friends they lived down the street. So our children grew up with their children and became best friends and all this and that. And the father was a Mormon bishop, and was also the chief of police of this city. And so we kind of hit it off and all this and that, and as parents. And one day I said to him, his name was Mike, I said, Mike, I know the Mormon church has a really big support system for the members of the church and the community. Do you have any ladies that might not have jobs because they have kids and they got to get them ready for school, and they just don't have their schedule prevents them from having a 9-to-5 job and all that? And he goes, yes, Ernie, we do. And I said, well, we could sure use a few of those gals assembling knives. So this is what's bizarre. I'm living in this community, small town, well, not small, but town. And every morning, 6 or 7 ladies would come to our door at about 7:45, because they started at 8, knock on the door. They'd all come in, and we had picnic tables set up, folding picnic tables set up in our living room, and they assembled our knives. And I always thought, what do the neighbors think is going on in that house down the block? Those women show up every morning. And I thought, oh, that must be some gossip going on with all those neighbors. But
that's funny.
Yeah, we did that for almost 2 years. And then we rented a place and bought some machines. And it's funny because a couple of our vendors basically quit their jobs and came to work for us. Like
Oh, yeah.
Because it's fun. Because
yeah,
knives are
yeah,
fun.
it was knives.
So I've got a question for you. So
Yeah.
back when you're working for the aerospace company in the start of this story, were you exposed to CNC
Oh
in
yeah,
that shop?
yeah,
So
100%.
do you feel like that had an impact on how you could how were you able to understand how the modern manufacturing world would work by having that early exposure, which is so much earlier than most people? Because it's basically science fiction to talk about CNC to people that didn't
Mhm.
have their hands on it at the time, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes. In fact, the first time that I was exposed to CNC mills and lathes was I was also working. I started working at it's a long story. I I got a job. I had three jobs, and one of them was I worked nights at local college as uh, the tool room guy who
Uh-huh.
checked out all the tools for all the machine shop classes that were going on there. And during the day, I was working for a machine shop called Waltz Precision Machines, and they had two NC mills and three NC lathes, and it was a job shop and a bunch of other manual machines and all that too. And so, having been working at that machine shop was the first time I saw the NCs, and then I actually became a programmer because I had also taken all kinds of every math class that you can imagine that in a high school and in college, and also geometry and all this and that. So the programming at that time was a lot more basic than it is now. But I remember uh, this is funny because we had I'm going to call it a teletype machine for lack of a better name,
Mm-hmm.
that was hooked up to a computer in Chicago, which was 2,000 miles away. And we would submit stuff, we'd type stuff in that we were, whatever it was that was going on, what I typed in a lot of coordinates and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
then overnight, they would send us back a program that we could use for our NC machine. So it really was in the kind of not the
Yeah.
beginning, but not certainly not where it is now. And so then, as I was working in that nighttime tool shop, tool crib, one of the teachers, uh, who I got to know pretty good, said, "Hey, Ernie, you want to come and work for Hughes Aircraft?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't even know who Hughes Aircraft is." And he goes, "Well, it's a big aerospace company." And he was a project manager over there who taught school at night. And he goes, "Here's the deal. Call me tomorrow and we'll bring you in for an interview." And so I called him and he said, "When can you start?" He said, I don't, "You don't even have to come in for an interview. I know who you are. Just when can you start?" So I went over to Walt's Precision and I gave him a 2 week notice. And I said, I'm going to be moving on. And that started me at Hughes Aircraft. And that was their NC programs were a lot, the program, their NC operations were a lot more sophisticated than Walt's Precision Machines. And so, yeah, I paid attention to all of that. Although I was really not an NC, I never was an NC operator or anything because
Mm-hmm.
I was a manual machinist. And but yeah, the NC stuff. I remember when they brought in the very first, and it cost like $150,000 when they brought in this machine or thing that could actually make something. They could build prototype parts by shining a laser into this liquid. It's like a big bird.
Yeah, centering like
Yeah.
3D. I
Oh my
remember when that came
God.
around too.
And I was like, "What the hell is that?" And they said, "Yeah, if you can draw something, we can program it and create the part, to
Yeah.
see if it works." So there was a lot of first at that time because it was at the same time that the computer capabilities were being absorbed more and more and more into the manufacturing process. The military had use of I mean, they helped develop the internet and everything else. So they had their hands in everything from the beginning. But yeah, the use in manufacturing, there was a big NC
Yeah.
division there.
Well, I have to think that really set you up for the future you would have because, a lot of knife companies that predate that era, you look at the knives and you can see how that manufacturing world transformed moving forward and the way that products were made, the way they were designed in order to be made that way. And I think your familiarity, which put you in a very small group of people, I imagine in the 80s
That
to
time,
have,
especially.
yeah, it's
Oh
like
Yeah.
it's a head
And
start that,
a lot of guys were self-taught
Yeah.
that were making knives. So when they learned how to run a milling machine, they literally had to learn how to run a milling machine, not an NC,
Right.
while they were making their custom knives.
Right.
And so that kind of brings me to something that I wrote down here. If you guys want to,
Yeah. Lay it on us.
uh, what what's happened is that, like, what I see is kind of part of a new transition. Uh, is it went from, at least from my viewpoint, it went from handmade, one at a time knife making, to buying machines that allowed you to, and I'm talking about manual machines, so like milling machines and lathes and things like that. So you could make your own parts, you could make them precise, but you still had to grind the blades and all of the, you did all the finish work and ground the radiuses and everything on the handles and all that. And then the ability for people to access that, we're going years. This is a long
yeah.
10,
This is
15-year
essentially this.
process.
You're right now, you're fully just in my years of knife making. Started fully manual, moved into CNC. So go dig into it because I want to hear where your perspective is.
And then as and I mean an NC mill, back when I was at Hughes and all that, they probably cost $250,000. But as decades went by, and the manufacturing in China of machines, and even in the United States, a lot of that, the prices went way down. And I'm not talking overnight. I'm talking 15 plus years, to the point where maybe 5 to 6 or 7 years ago, it became feasible for a person to buy a small NC mill and put it in their garage. That might have been $50,000, $60,000, but guys would get a loan and or lease one or whatever. Heat treating became more and more doable, rather than you could buy bigger ovens and all kinds of stuff like that. So it became part of the ability of knife makers to take advantage of some of those technologies that now became affordable to what you just say the average knife maker. That the quality of the products started to improve. Now, when I say that improve, it's just that, if, like, for example, my knives, still, you can't take one handle off one. If I had three of, CQC 7s or three CQC 8s or whatever I had made, I can't take those parts and mix and match. They don't fit because they're still completely matched and done and ground and everything by hand. I cut the parts out on a machine, but I hand fit everything. So you had that ability to help the knife maker go from, I can make one knife a week, to making basically a couple, 2 or 3 knives a week, or maybe even larger numbers than that if they're really getting on the horse. And so the thing is that what happened from that point is that it pushed the ability of what you would call custom knives to another tier, where now you could have all of these fluted handles, and guys could put in all kinds of crazy, not just the checkering like you have on a deer rifle, but all kinds of crazy stuff. And Chris Reeves was doing stuff with his knives and anodizing it, and then bead blasting, and then anodizing again, and doing all this kind of really cool, crazy stuff. And it pushed that into a really nice place to be for custom knives. I could have gone completely that way, but I'm a hands-on guy, so I still, as a custom knife maker, my personal philosophy is that I got to build that knife. I just took the machining technology to shorten up and do what I would consider like the grunt work. Cutting something out on a bandsaw doesn't affect, or cutting it out on a laser has no effect on what.
There's a point where that is not your skin. This is the thing is I've spent a lot of time in this headspace, right? Because when like I bought my first CNC mill in 2012, I still have it. And at that point, it was like witchcraft still. People are like, it's production. You know, there's all these memes, but push the green button and the knife falls out the end. And it's like, there's a point where I look at it and I'm like, I've been building knives at that point for 10 years or something. And I've done it all by hand. I'm like, these are still hard. I'm still a knife maker. Like these are still things. And it's been interesting to see that kind of progression through. You know, one thing that you mentioned actually is a little bit of a digression, but when you were looking at production, you went to laser. That actually is like a period, like correct process that like we don't see as much anymore. You're less likely, if you're like, I'm going to build a folder, I'm going to build a production folder, someone is less likely to go laser. And I think that's really interesting, but it informs the way that like your knives, like that is some of the origin of how they look and how they were constructed. And you still build them that way. And there's this really clean line of like, it's instantly recognizable. And I love that. Cause now it's like it's like, okay, you go water jet, then you go to machine, or laser was like early. I mean, Benchmade, Bob T, and like a bunch of other guys, but that informed that, like, that was the CNC that you were going, which is interesting. That was the outsourced piece. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you had to say if there was one essential machine, well, you can make handles by hand, and you can actually make quite a few of them.
Sure.
If you set up jigs and things like that to help you get along with it. Cutting stuff out of steel and cutting stuff out of titanium, you've got to have help. And that's what that laser does.
Yeah.
And then the other thing would be grinding. You know, the production knives, of course, are all ground on a burger machine, because there's no way on earth that I could grind, you know, so many X thousand knives a month or something like that. It's just impossible.
Don't want to, no matter what.
Yeah, no. But those two machines would probably be the essential machines for anybody starting up a business. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to buy a laser, because there's a lot of laser companies out there now that will cut parts for you and all that. But of course, as you know, what may cost you $3 or $4 to do, you might be paying 20 or 25 bucks per unit to a company to do it for you, because they got to stay in business too.
Yeah.
But the thing about that, the progression where it went was, knife makers were using those machines to produce parts for them, and they were still hand finishing all of the goodies, the goodness of it to make it a handmade knife. But now I've seen it go even another step further to, it almost is push the green button and the knife pops out. Not in reality, but theoretically, most of the parts are actually done via machine process, which, and I have no bone to pick with anybody, for gosh sakes, that's fine. But you can make handles, and your NCs are so precise. You can make titanium handles and have them put a tiny little radius on break every edge on every corner and every line, so that it's a finished part almost, you know, when it comes off the machine. And the same thing with the knife handles, or I mean with the knife blades and all that good stuff. But lo and behold, over in China, we're watching real close, and they started producing NC made knives almost, you know, from the get-go. And look where it's taken them. Now they can make a knife that it's so freaking precise.
They're amazing. iPhone. I mean, we talk about this a lot, because that when we see some of this progression, not to derail you, but we see some of this progression is knife makers doing custom with CNCs. And around this time, like Ken kind of pioneered that like mid-tech thought process, which was, okay, I'm going to do these. They're not customs, but I'm touching them more than a production, having a shop make the parts. I'm bringing them in and finishing them. They're still kind of low numbers. The reason that I as a brand in 2013, I moved away from the term mid-tech was because of this shift where it's like, oh, you're starting to really see the rise of like full OEM product. And it was almost like custom where you're like, is it a custom? If you're like, and that's when Ken's like, no, this is mid-tech. And then it was like shops were doing so much of the work that now it's not really mid-tech, but people are calling it mid-tech. And I was like, fine. My stuff, if I outsource anything, I'm calling it production because I just didn't want to have to try to analyze it.
Yeah.
And then we saw this thing where it was like the mid-tech kind of dried up and then it went full OEM white label production and just like blasted off.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm loving this conversation. Can I pause for one moment while I go to the bathroom?
Yep.
Well, I think that what has happened is, as like in every other industry, there's an evolution that takes place. And going from one guy in his shop with a bicycle with a big round stone on it, sharpening knives, all the way up to really like that analogy that we talked about was push the green light and a knife pops out. It's almost at that point, but it's a evolution. We know it's going to happen in every industry, and it has happened in almost every single industry. So the thing is, that's the norm. But as a knife maker and a nuts and bolts guy like you, there's still something that really tickles my fancy about sitting there and getting dirty and gritty and having to wear masks and respirators and grinding that damn blade and grinding those handles. That I think a lot of people still identify with. They're like that Estwing hammer. Now I know Estwing isn't sitting out there, but there is some handwork that's done on those hammers, but it's stayed the same. Now you can make the choice to do that to any degree in that evolutionary path, or you can hook your caboose onto that train and follow it all the way to I don't want to do anything except push a button and there's my knife. And there's nothing wrong with that because that's the evolution that's going to take place. But I've chosen to basically kind of stay not even really mid-tech because my parts they're still completely, I have to drill and tap every single handle. I've got to
and you're doing it in your way, and that was
just my choice.
It's your choice of how you make your product. In my mind, it's like that's still custom. I cut frame sets, I cut blades. I'm like, I'm still making a custom, and I've done it both ways. And I feel like when I'm saying this, it's carrying some weight. When you say that, you're like, no, this is how I make it custom. Yeah.
This is me.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't pass any judgment. For gosh sakes, everyone can go any road they want to go. But and as a major company, not us, but let's say a Gerber, Crenshaw, Buck, they got to automate in order to really thrive. They have to automate as much as humanly possible. That's a fact. As a business, the thing that bothers me though is the Chinese, because what I think is going on with our industry, in fact, I know what's going on. You can't go from non-existence to 1 year later having at your disposal hundreds of thousands of dollars to do full page ads in all kinds of magazines and banner ads. Believe me, I know exactly how much it costs to put all those banners up down at the Blade Show and things like that. And I also know how long it takes from when you make your first knife to you actually go from running in the red to running in the black.
Mm-hmm.
And what bothers me is those companies that are coming from China, and like I said, they make perfect, flawless knives.
They're beautiful.
Yeah. But the thing about it is my son, Lucas, who is now a knife maker also, we were down at a show in Nashville, I think it was, and there was a couple Chinese companies there, and he was looking at their knives and he goes, "Man, Dad," he came back and he said, "Man, those knives they're really nice." He goes, "Is that our competition?" And I said, "Well, in a way it is, but," he said, "But Dad, you know what? Those knives have no soul." And I was like, whoa, that is a profound insight, because they don't, because those same factories in China that are now making knives on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, they're making hubcaps, and on Thursday, they're making end caps for pipes or some damn thing. They're not knife makers. They're not knife people. And although they can make a finished product that is pretty much flawless, I think that there is well, let me take that back. I know that there is an effort to subvert and undermine the American-made knife companies, and even Boker and all those other companies. Uh, they want to take over our industry just the same as they want to take over all of the other industries in the United States. And it's a sad thing. And I think it's incumbent upon us as knife makers and people that have influence through podcasts and things like that to be able to educate the public that, I got it. You're buying a thing, but that thing, it's not the result of a knife maker's uh, years of experience and life experience and craft and everything else that ends up making that product. And I think it's a sad thing because a lot of people buy those knives. Now, because they're made so nice, they can take a factory made knife that maybe someone waved their hand over somewhere in the process, and they can charge $1,000 for it, or even $2,000 for it. And again, it's part of that evolutionary process. It's a free market, etc. But
Mm-hmm.
I am so impressed with handmade things, and uh, of course everything that's made here in the United States, because we set the stage. Everything that's going on in especially like China is a result of what we did as a country and what our technologies did in development and research and all that. And all they did was just pick it up and run with it and then apply it to all these other industries, because it's it's a sad thing, but I just want to make people aware that knife has no soul. The
It's
soul
interesting. You
comes from
you
us.
Yeah, you mentioned, well, and this is a tricky one because like I look now, let's see where this is like three or four prongs here that I'm going to try to like wrangle in for myself. We were talking about like the Phil Hartsfield coarse grinds, right? And you can see a human's hand in that, right? And it's not refined, but
Mhm.
it's human. Then we were talking early days CNC, and you were talking about like all this fluting and fine machining and stuff. And it's like, if you look at a knife that Michael Walker made in the 80s completely by hand, and you look at something that you see now, if you don't understand the processes that Michael used, like, oh, he actually used a rose engine for this, and he used a rose engine to cut a die for a sinker EDM that was then
Yeah.
manually controlled, and well, he actually cut that blade's not ground, he cut that on a pantograph mill. If you don't understand the backstory, if you don't understand the process, things get muddy, right? And
Yeah.
it's not from a tool standpoint, it's not that one makes a better tool, right? If you end up at the same result, you're at the same result.
Mhm.
This is where I think community and knowledge really play a huge part, right? On the knife maker side, this is my like baby old man coming out, which is I still want to see people learn by making things.
Yeah.
Because I think years ago, I took a 2-week course in bladesmithing, and I left and I felt like a better craftsperson, right? Because I realized like, oh, I understand how to move metal in a different way than even using machines. This morning I was reading how to make multi-blade folders by, I think, Eugene Shadley and Terry Davis or something. And I thought this is really apropos to the CNC side, which was, he's got an insert in the page talking about his surface grinder and talking about how people question whether his knife is handmade because he's using a surface grinder to flatten his parts. and he says, I'm still a knife maker and I understand how to make a knife. If you just have a surface grinder, you're not a knife maker. And I loved that. Okay. So now this segues into, we go mid-tech, right? People are still making things. They're outsourcing parts to create some efficiency because of demand. This is tying into the internet and the ability for us to go to a show and sell 50 pieces at a show or have really high demand. So we start to look for pieces outside of, okay. As this is all happening, the veil becomes thinner with reaching out to Chinese manufacturing, right? Italian manufacturing. There's, different times. And through this, like Seiki City in like early days, I mean, this is Almar, right? These are companies that are producing overseas that are making really awesome products. Seiki City stuff was great. Japan. It's its own thing, right? What I think really started to shift is twofold. One, a lot of custom makers started to just go direct overseas and have small production runs done. When you're doing that, you're showing exactly how you make a knife as a custom knife maker. Okay. This is not something that maybe everyone is thinking about, but this is happening. Here's how I cut my law. Here's what's really important. And God knows knife makers are like super easygoing, and we're just going to let you manufacture it the way you want. We're not going to criticize it until it's perfect. Okay. So this happens for probably what I saw with like contemporaries is like a decade. Okay. Those brands that are primarily doing OEM work, maybe with a small sublabel, are now becoming their own forces. At this point, most factories are looking at this and going, this is not a threat to us. They don't have distribution. They don't have connections to consumers. This is also happening. I would say that the position that we are in now is like somewhat self-created through the desire to further small businesses. And like, this ties into the growth thing, which is really hard, which as a custom maker, making a living with your hands, you injured yourself. You had another job when you did that. Like I'm limited by what I can create, and I have a family, and it's terrifying. So we look for ways to expand. Okay. But I think now we're in this position where it's like these companies, they do what they do, which is learn and improve.
You can't,
right? So
there's no argument. There's
no argument. This was really interesting. I sent TJ, I think I actually sent this to you, seeing product releases at Blade. And this is where it comes back to your kind of comment around like soul or personality. I looked and I was watching this video, and what my feeling was all of these companies, I'm like, every one of the knives, they're like Blade Show, 6 knives, and they're all better than the last. Awesome. I'm like, 10 years ago, that would have been a company's show release. That one of those would have been the big story for that company, and they would have pumped it up. Now it's just in a sea of design. And that's where I think that, like, I don't see it as competition. It's a shift, but man, it's like, you're right. There's just,
well,
I want to hear this from you.
I have some thoughts on this. And so a phrase may not have heard me say it yet, Ernest, but Lucas certainly has heard me say it a lot. And that phrase I keep using is the process is the product. And this is where that really applies. And what I mean by that is when you go buy a knife off of a custom maker's table, you really know that you're buying a piece of them from an ethos standpoint, but also you're witness to the fact that you're buying them standing in front of a grinder. You're buying them looking under a magnifying glass doing engraving, and you're buying the process on the back end and the ethos of the brand. But I really think the process is one of the core value points there, because if a maker doesn't disclose anything about how it's made, it's hard to ascribe value to that
Yeah.
thing.
And a lot of people hid it for a long time also.
Yeah.
Early days, like companies having things produced, US companies having things produced, not saying it's produced outside, blah, blah, blah. Like there's nebulous, components.
But where this comes down to what we were just speaking about is that if you have really high-end knives coming from overseas, which they are spectacularly made, if you have companies that use that service as an OEM for their company, and also those companies have their own brand, you can, in my mind, just my perspective is it almost distills down that the entire group of knives that I see over there are all the same product because they're all the same process, right? And what differentiates authorship of your own products, and particularly, I mean, the way I always look at it is I live in the United States. I make the knives that I want to sell. These are my knives. I live here. If you live in Denmark, if you did live in China or Japan, it's like the ownership over the process is what differentiates you. And everyone congregating around a single process creates a sea, like you were saying, of it's all actually the same product in different shapes.
Throw another flute on it. Throw more anodizing. Put more mokutai.
You look at an Emerson, and it's like, to the point about the laser and the way that you're hand tapping holes and stuff like that. It's a differentiated product because it has a dedicated process behind it. You author the process, and therefore you author the product. If you don't author the process, you don't really have your own product. And so that's the way I view it. Is not even like a price competition or quality competition. It's just that I want to author my own process, therefore author my own product. And I know it's going to be different because I have a different brain on my shoulders than what they do. And that's okay. They can do really well at what they do. I can do well at what I do. And I think it's perceivable when you walk through a blade show, when 2/3 of the tables are the same knife in the way I'm describing it. And then you see a table where it's like that process was authored by someone else. I can tell, you know what I mean? And that's just how I see myself carving out a future in the industry, because you can't really, join the crowd and really differentiate yourself, even if the design's different, because the authorship starts earlier than design.
I want to tell you a little story. At the California Knife Show, way, way, way back, I think it was the first one I ever went to. It's funny because you get, maybe not so much anymore, but the show forums used to say, people I want to sit next to, people I don't want to have a table next to. And that was always like,
I would love to see those. I would like a stack to go through.
Oh, there was a lot of that. But I ended up, lo and behold, with a table right next to Bob Loveless. And I had 5 or 6 knives on my table, and young guy trying to make my way. And I'm sitting next to this gruff old guy, and he didn't even really speak to me the whole show or anything, but I was paying attention to him. And this young man came up and he said, sir, I'm looking for a knife to give to my dad for his birthday. And I really like your knives. And they were some of those Bob Loveless with the bone handles on them. I mean, the stag handles on them, his classic Bob Loveless drop point. And he was looking at him and all that. And he goes, so how much is this knife? And Bob said, it's $750. And the guy was like, holy smokes. He goes, that's a little too rich from what I wanted to spend for my dad's present. I don't have that much money. And he goes, well, be that as it may, that's fine with me. And he said, well, thank you. And he walked off. Then he came back about maybe an hour and a half later. And he said, sir, excuse me, but I got a couple of questions. And he goes, I've gone through the entire show and I see a lot of knives that they look just like the knives you have on your table. They're almost the same knife. And he goes, and some of them are like only $125. And Bob looked at him and he said, you know what? And he pointed to one of his knives and he goes, they're, let's say $250 or something like that. He said that some of those knives, they're only $250. And he looked down and pointed at one of his knives and he said, son, he goes, that knife's only worth $250. And the kid was like, I'm not following this. I don't know what you mean. He goes, but you see that logo right there? That's worth $500. And I thought, God damn, that is Bob Loveless. Now, once I became to know who Bob Loveless was, I was like, that was Bob Loveless to a T. But
man,
it was
I
just
can't
funny.
even tell you how much I love that.
And I'd like to add one thing is that probably when he walked around and saw the $250 knives that looked a lot like it, they were all inspired by that $750.
Well, they were
knife.
Bob Loveless drop point hunters. I even made a couple of those myself in the day.
Yeah,
it's human. That's human nature. That is okay. This is like a segue just for fun. Before we started recording, I kind of told you were one of my really early like makers that I love the term modeling, right? Because it's like you look around and you think like, man, where do I want to go? Like, okay, how did this person get there? And when I started, I was doing a lot of martial arts. I was really interested in all things fighting, all things tactical, and I mean, geez, I had like a really early commander in my pocket. And what's interesting when I look, you as a maker, I don't think I integrated a lot of like your design style into my knives. That wasn't the thing. What I saw about you was the way that you showed up in the market and in community, and then diversification and brand. Like I think you were one of the first makers where I really saw when you were doing t-shirts and apparel, didn't just feel like you were mailing it in. It felt like you had a clothing brand internally. That's how it felt. Right. And as we've gone through the years, like we've seen this kind of, like, I know a few things, right? It's like, okay, so you've got the training, you've got coffee, right? You've got whiskey. What else am I missing?
Well, the apparel. We have an apparel company.
Can we go into the apparel just a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. I love apparel, man. I love it. I think it's untapped resource in our industry, right? And I think you've done a really good job for a really long time. Okay. How did that come about?
Well, I guess there's, again, I hate using this term because I think it's used too often incorrectly, but I have a real artistic desire. Let's just say that. I'm not telling you I'm a skilled artist or anything. I just have an artistic desire. And I didn't like corporate branded like Benchmade or Buck, just some stylized thing on the breast pocket there. I wanted to do all kinds of shirts. I wanted to do everything that was unique and attractive. And what appealed to me, I always looked at myself as kind of the average Joe. If something caught my eye, then I'm thinking there's a lot of people that are probably going to catch their eye at the same
universal. What do they call that? Like a universal consumer in a way. Like if you like it, a lot of people are going to like it.
Yeah, I think that's what I always was trying to tell myself. Now, my tastes are my taste and your tastes are your taste, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think there was enough of me out there, so to speak. And so we decided to start making shirts that had more than just a picture of the knife or the name of the company and all that. And a lot of our shirts, I mean, they have absolutely no relationship to the Emerson Knife Company at all. And I hand drew all of the t-shirt designs for probably 20 plus years because I like shirts that have cool designs on them and stuff. And so, I mean, I looked at the surf surf shirts and skateboard companies and everything else. And I was like, oh, those are cool. I like what they're doing. We can do something, unique, but in a similar vein. And so we did also realize that, we're not going to produce 10,000 shirts a month or anything like that, but we need to be able to be flexible so that I can try designs and do things like that. So we opened up a print shop, our own. We bought all the equipment. We have multiple stations, big spider ones that go around, and they still have to all be done by hand.
Mm-hmm.
We don't use automatic printers or anything like that, but we have our own shirt printing company. Hats, we do purchase the hats. We do some of the iron-on patches and things like that. We have engravers and things for iron or for leather work and everything. But it just expanded to the point where it became it's really its own business. We were going to use it, but it's the same idea with our knife company. It took me about 10 years from that 1997 to we brought every single process in-house, everything.
Are we talking manufacturing at this point,
In
or
the
are we talking screen? Yeah.
In the
Okay.
manufacturing of the knives.
Yep.
And the only thing that we do not do is we don't do the black oxide coating, because that we're held to a lot of restrictions by the state of California and the EPA and all that. So we have a place that's just down the street from us. They do all our black oxide. But every other process that I could imagine that we were going to have to do or did, I brought in-house. I wanted complete, and I'm not a control freak, believe me. I'm a great delegator. But I wanted to have everything inside my own four walls. And we the same principle, because I apply, if a principle is successful in my estimation, I apply that principle to wherever or whatever I'm doing. We did the same thing with the shirts. In order for me to be able to produce shirts on an ongoing basis, we needed to have our own shirt screen printing company. And so we carved out, once we moved into our bigger facility, we carved out a whole section of that for the shirts and the screen printing and all that other good stuff. And then we just expanded a lot of the ideas about the shirts and the logos and the different designs and everything into auxiliary products and ancillary stuff that we were doing, that people, they like to identify with. People wear Nike t-shirts and they wear Nike socks, and I'm a monster Rolling Stones fan, and I've got Rolling Stones socks, and I've got Rolling Stones underwear also that my daughter gave me.
You're making the point right here, right? Which is, I harp on this a lot, and there's this interesting thing, right? Which over like my time in the industry, I'll have people tell me like, "Oh man, you're really good at like this brand thing and like marketing," and I'm like, one, it's just like it's what I like, but you have to look around. What you're doing and what you're saying is like this. You can look in the industry and find the people to learn from. You guys did it in our industry, and outside of our industry, a lot of this stuff is done. Like if you look at an apparel company like that and you're like, okay, you do the smalls that tie in, and then you cross over logos and cross over branding. And it's like, I'm not doing anything unique. I mean, you're doing this 20 years ago. This is just like opening yourself up to look around, man. Okay. So you've got the screen printing. It can act as its own self-supporting business at this point.
It is. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is. Yeah. And
diversification.
But see, the other thing too is maybe not so much at this moment, but I'm a backup for a backup guy plan. And I looked at what was going on in the gun industry, that, hey man, a stroke of a pen in Washington, D.C. could put me out of business, because wherever the guns go, we're the caboose on that train.
Right.
We're going right along with them. And so I always looked at, my name is on this company. My name is on this brand. My entire family has worked since day one. I mean, our our factory was a daycare center for all my children. In my wife's office, when each one of them got, you know, old enough to, be out of a bassinet, or even when in a bassinet, they were here. But my wife's mother worked for us. She was the ad hoc babysitter for everything. Um, my wife is the brains of the outfit. I'm kind of the government mule. My daughter Megan is director of marketing. My daughter Rachel is director of operations for the factory. And my son Lucas is now moving into, hopefully, if he wants to, he will take over the running of the company. In other words, he's learning how to do he's a computer guy for sure, but a real rough and tumble kid too. So he knows what's in my heart, and he has it in his heart. And I'll tell you, this is an interesting little story, because when he was 16, he asked me if he could go to the mall. Now, the mall that he's talking about, we live in the greater suburbs of Los Angeles, so to speak. It's not a real nice place.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reluctant. I was a little bit of a helicopter parent at times with my kids, but I wanted to protect them from potential danger. And I said, damn, Lucas, I don't know, man. What do you hell you want to go to that mall for? And he said, well, my friends are going. And I said, well, I don't know if I want you to go. And this is off the cuff, just spontaneous. He goes, but Dad, who's going to be there to protect them? And I was like, damn, this kid's 16 years old, and he's viewing himself as, my role is going to be also to protect my friends. And there was boys and girls. And so anyway, when I say he's got me in his heart, so to speak. He's got the kind of person that I would give my company to.
Right.
To
on multiple levels. And that's
the
thing. It's a holistic view.
So because of all of that stuff, my family is now tied to us. Their skill sets are more attuned to the knife industry than going out and getting a job at American Airlines or something like that. So I have a responsibility to provide a long-going future for them. And so a lot of these other companies that we created were also in case something happened and knives became illegal. And so they would have at least the ability to take over some of those other endeavors and make at least a living, and do all of that. So again, I plan for the long run, in the same way that this is no exaggeration either. I have over 2,000 knife designs cataloged in books in alphabetical order. The stack is about this high. They're not completely full, but it's several reams worth of paper, so that if I have a heart attack, or I get hit by a car, or some bad guy shoots me in the head, that the company can still go on. We introduce maybe 5 to 6 knives a year, sometimes on a special run, and we just see how people react to it. Then it might get folded into a production knife, etc. So if 5 or 6 knives a year with 2,000 designs sitting they're not all award-winning designs, by the way.
Sure.
I'm not trying to tell you they are. But out of those 2,000 knives, there's probably 40 or 50 or 60 years worth of designs sitting, so that if I get removed from the equation, there'll still be Emerson knives and Emerson designs available to the kids if they decide to continue on in the knife company. So, like I said, I plan long-term, real long-term at times. And so these other companies and all that, some of them are just for fun. The whiskey it's a lot of fun, super lot of fun. But at the same time, it's grown into its own creature also. And so that's part of the whole, I guess, reason for those other part of the reason for all those other things. Plus, I noticed that over the last 20, 30, 40 years or whatever of going to knife shows, a lot of our people drink whiskey. And so, yeah, I mean, because I shared a lot of whiskey with them over the years, and they have their favorite whiskey. This or Ernie, you got to try this.
You're
this
running the bar tab at a point.
Yeah, and so we said, well, why don't we have an Emerson whiskey company, our own brand?
Yeah.
And but at the same time, remember I told you that that principle applies across the board. I didn't want to just go to Maker's Mark and say, hey, we'd like to work with you. Can you brand a bottle of whiskey with our label on it and all that? Because then it's not us. It's just branding, straight cold branding. And so when we started the company, it took us about 3 years to basically search the world. I knew it was going to be bourbon out of Kentucky, but we had to find the ability to be able to pick our own bourbon. And I'm not a distiller, but we don't own a bottling facility and all that. All of that has to be done under special licensing and all of that other good stuff. But we found the ability through some friends that we met, some one way or the other, and we can go down to Kentucky to some of the distilleries that we work with, and we get to pick and choose the barrels. We taste them and decide that's the one we want, and then that gets turned over to the bottling company, and we design all the labels and do all of that good stuff, and then they ship the whiskey to our distributor, because I don't have a liquor license to sell.
Right.
But you can buy it off our website, but it comes through us like an internet company that has they distribute.
Like drop shipped.
Yeah, they drop ship. Yeah, that's the word.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I had to have at least the amount of control over being able to pick the whiskey that goes into our bottles under our labels. So it isn't, again, it's a standalone business, and we have a lot of fun. And I usually make the first 20 to 25 knives to pair up with serial numbered and
just
with
more fun
knife and all that.
You're having fun, man. I
am.
mean, that is like that TJ. I was talking with TJ earlier, and he's like, man, it's the whys. You know, I was rattling off all these things that I had kind of followed over the years, and it's the whys. And I remember seeing you at shows over the years with your family. And this is strange. Like you and I don't think we've ever met. Right. And we've been in the same places a lot of times. I have a tendency, unless even people that I look up to in the industry, I very rarely go up to them unless there's a real reason, because shows are busy. And the last thing I need to do is like be another person coming up to shake your hand and, hey, Mr. Emerson. So unless there's a reason to know someone, there's a lot of people where I'm like, I know a lot about you and I've followed you for a long time. We just never met. But in that, like I would see you at shows with your family, and then I would see you doing these business things. And it felt internal in that, like, oh, he's creating security for his family. He's creating diversification for the business. He's seeing something in the market. And that was always just really fun, you know?
Yeah.
I like to say, build a pyramid, not a tower.
Yeah. Build a pyramid.
Yeah. And that's really the reasons. I mean, it also, honest, if I didn't have apparel or whiskey or coffee or any of that stuff, the knife company provides a living for us.
Yeah.
So I don't need to do that stuff, but I have the opportunity to do it because my needs are being taken care of by the knife company. Yeah. So it allows me, let's say an upcoming knife maker, it'd be tough for him to say, hey, I'm going to start this company and start that company, because, man, money doesn't grow on trees.
It's not a get rich quick
it's scheme. Hard earned, and you got to spend it wisely, because you can spend it fastly. And, I mean, believe me, I know all about it. So those things would not have been possible had I not had some modicum of success in the endeavors with the knife company. So it's funny, I owe everything back to Bruce Lee in the very beginning of my entire career. I mean, it opened up every single door that's happened for me. But it's just been Mr. Toad's wild ride, and we've had a blast. I got to tell you, you mentioned Saki City, right?
Yeah.
So I was invited over to Saki City to this knife festival type thing, but it was also, I was working with the Japanese knife industry. They wanted me to come over and advise them. Again, this sounds real pompous, but this is what they asked me to do: advise them on modernizing the knife manufacturing capabilities of Seiki City. Now, you got to understand something. At that time in the world, Seiki City produced all the knives.
All the knives.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fact.
What circa what year is this?
That was early 2002, 2003, somewhere.
And this is probably at the tail end of Seiki, right? Like in a certain way, like the Max, like the brands that they were producing. I would assume this isn't like peak, right?
I don't know,
okay.
Honestly, because I wasn't that knowledgeable about what knife companies, and I knew almost all the knife companies, like let's say SOG and like Elmar, right, and a lot of those. I knew they were all made over there, but that's pretty much the extent of it. But when I arrived in Seiki City, and people don't understand this either, Seiki City is not a city that has a knife making reputation or a knife making community. Seiki City is a knife making city.
Yeah,
100%. It would not exist if it weren't for the knives. Yeah. And when you drive around in Seiki City, every single garage is open, and there's a heat treater, or there's a burger grinders, or whatever. There's knife handles being made. Every single house. And George Sakai, or Yuhei Sakai, is the king. He's the king of Seiki City, and he actually lives in a castle up on a hill. It's a trip. And but anyway, when they brought me into the main Sakai manufacturing facility, I was rocked. It almost made me sit down and shake my head, because I went over there thinking that I was going to walk into a Toyota plant where there were robots and machines and sparks flying and all this and that. You know what I saw? I saw maybe hundreds, dozens and dozens and dozens of people either sitting on their haunches, like crisscross applesauce, Indian style, we used to call it, in front of grinders on the floor. I saw people laying down on the floor grinding. I saw all kinds of manual milling machines and drill presses. Everything was being done by hand. Honest, there was no automation whatsoever. And part of that goes back to, this is the way we've always done it. That's a tough mold to break. I deal with it here in the shop all the time, because if I change up a process, it's like, that's not the way we've been doing it, boss. And I'm like, yeah, but we're changing. Yeah, but we've always done it this way. And again, it's just a built-in human nature thing. So I walked in and I was like, holy mackerel, this is like 1925.
Yeah.
And they're still making these knives.
It's like Pete Gerber style making, I mean,
it's
making
crazy.
Machines.
But the first thing that I told, God, what's his name? It might be Yuki, George's younger brother, because he was in charge of all the manufacturing. I said, how do you get these knives? Well, we cut them out on these stamping machines and stuff like that. And I said, you have to get a laser. And I said, you know what? I own a Mitsubishi laser, and I'm standing here talking to you in Japan where they're made, and you don't have a Mitsubishi laser. And holy smokes, you guys have to start with the laser. Because it's obvious you can do all the grinding and all that stuff, and you do have some burgers and things scattered out throughout the city. It was interesting because there were these little tiny cars. They were like a Volkswagen cut in half with a bed on the back, almost like a little tiny truck. And they would go throughout the city picking up parts and delivering parts to all these guys. We're going over this area. That's where they make all the handles. We're going over this area is where they do all the stamping, etc., all that stuff. And I said, man, I can't believe you guys don't have a laser. And they're like, no, we don't, but we wanted to find out what we could do. And I said, well, let's start with a laser. And so they about a week or two later, they placed an order for the first Mitsubishi laser that Sakai had in his manufacturing and all that. And then I conversed with them over time about some other things that I thought would improve their industry and all that. So I was, again, it's funny because nobody knows any of those stories.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole bunch of side stories because I got to work with actually some sword makers that were like sixth and seventh generation sword makers that were, one of them I worked with for while I was there for about 3 or 4 days, was a living treasure
Mm-hmm.
in the country of Japan. But anyway, yeah, so the here we are, and here I am coming from Benchmade, and Benchmade's trying to improve all their technologies and doing all this stuff. And I go to the knife making capital of the world, and they're doing it the way they always did it.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
uh, it was unfortunate because at the same time, the Chinese were ramping up. They were buying every single used piece of NC equipment, every single milling machine. You couldn't go and buy used lathes and mills anymore because the Chinese were buying every single piece of equipment that existed. And so I told them, I said, you guys have to modernize. It's just, this is too labor intensive. You got to get your things up and running. You got to be able to produce, parts on an ongoing basis that are completely consistent from one day to the next. And all this
Interchangeable.
and that. And they kind of knew all that, but they were just looking to see if, what I had to add to the dish and all that. And so that was a cool thing too, that I got to do that. And of course they treated me like a guest of honor, and
That's pretty
my wife and I
special.
got to do really cool shit while we were there. Let's just say that.
That's great.
But yeah, they
Just
were,
interesting times. Like the knife cities are so interesting. Seiki is has been on my list forever. I've spent time in Maniago. I've spent a lot of time in Zollingen, and you realize you're like, it exists
yeah,
because of knives and cutlery, and but it permeates through. There is no confusion inside of that culture of knives existence or how they are made.
yeah.
That's pretty special.
Well, the cool thing about where we were um, was it was actually an extension of the historical center for the greatest or the greatest sword makers of all times, uh, because there was a conflux of rivers there that produced a very high uh, percentage and quality of black sand, which
Mm,
was the starting of which was
or
the iron.
Tamahagné,
Yeah,
or yeah.
yeah, that was the start for turning that into steel. And Masumune and all of those
Mm-hmm.
that are the most famous of all, they all came from right there. So it was very touching to me also to see that they had carried on the the tradition that the greatest swords makers in the history of the world were there, and now that's where the knife making capital of the world was.
Yeah.
And with deference to Solingen, again, another knife making capital, uh, also Sheffield,
Mm-hmm.
another one. And I'll tell you a little story about Sheffield. I was working with a guy who became a good friend of mine. He Simon Simon something or another was Ravenworks Armory in England, and what happened was we were working with the the military from the country of Jordan, and he was contracted to do a bunch of knives for them, and he got a hold of me, and I produced a bunch of stuff for them also, and became friends and throughout all that stuff. So he called me one day and he said, Ernie, there's uh, Wilkinson has been bought by like Gillette,
Mm-hmm.
because Wilkinson also made um, razor blades.
Safety razors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And he said, and he goes, I can't believe they're doing this. They bought the company and they're liquidating it. And then they're tearing it apart. They bought it because it was the competition. They didn't want the competition. They didn't buy it to expand on it, to make the
Wow.
legacy brand or anything. And he said, everything's for sale. So he said, I'm going to send you a list of all the stuff that's for sale. Sheet steel, rolls of steel. I mean, unbelievable stuff. Huge, huge factory. And he said that here's the really unfortunate thing. Wilkinson still made all of the swords for all the British officers and for all of the British royalty and all the ceremonial stuff, and that's gone. And he said, they're all going to have it made either in Pakistan or in China or some other place like that. And he goes, it's just, he goes over there. He goes, I go over there and I walk through and I go, oh my God, this is a disaster. And he bought all of there's an MOD knife that was being made for the British military. He bought all the blanks for it. I mean, it was like 10,000 blanks. He bought them for like $700 or something like that. So he said, if you ever need any blanks of some British military knives, just call me and I'll send you a whole box of them.
At least he got a chance to see it. That stuff always
forever.
We forget how long some of those timelines, like if you look at Wilkinson, you're like, how long did they run?
Yeah.
Talking about Boker, I went to their 150th anniversary.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So
isn't it?
when you go in and you're like, okay, here's the machine shop that keeps like the old stamping presses and old machinery working from the way that it was built in like, the early 1900s. And you just realize this is a different game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's so, but those moments where a company will close, you have this like small window where someone who cares can continue that legacy. And we've seen this in the US a lot, right? With the entire East Coast is full of warehouses of entire production lines of jewelry or silverware, firearms, great, where just the whole thing is just sold lock,
stock, and barrel.
Yep. No, it's pretty
wild. It's sad, but hopefully a lot of those industries are going to get revved up again. Bringing these companies and making the incentives good so that they can come back into, or making the incentives bad to force them to come back into the United States, whatever it takes. We were concerned about all the stuff when tariffs and all that, and some of the different companies closing down. And luckily, everybody that we work with has stayed the course, and we're good to go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and I really do. My wife might be more of an optimist than I am. I'm the ultimate pessimist. I never see something bad. I only see, okay, what do I got to do to get around this, to work around it, to improve it, to fix it, to get off on another off ramp and take the alternate route. And I believe in my heart of hearts that there is a golden era coming to the United States. It's going to take maybe 4 years for us to actually realize it at the ground level, where we're at the grocery stores or whatever, or buying a car or whatever it is. But I really truly believe that this country is going to come back. We're going to kick some serious ass worldwide with all our manufacturing and all of that good stuff. So I'm hopeful in that regard, because again, that tide, if American industry is up and running, the knife industry is going to be up and running too, and people are going to have good jobs that pay good wages, and they'll be able to make a decision they want to buy a knife from you or me or TJ or anybody, because I still see at those knife shows, I still see a lot of people buying knives, and that always I always ask Steve Shackelford and all that for the what are the attendance records and things for this year's show, and a lot of guys are into it, like, should I still have a booth there or not, or whatever. I'm only interested in it is how many more people are coming through that door, because that's good for it's like the old thing when if I had the best baseball team in the world but I was the only team, what good is that? I've got to have teams that are my competition, and the better those teams get, the better we get. And so I always look at things like, this industry is what's important, not me as a knife maker, because I'll just be gathered up in the arms of the hurricane if we can get this thing rocking and rolling and whatever it is. So that's my basic philosophy about right now, where we're at and where the industry's at. So I'm a big pessimist, and I've just got my sights on even bigger and better things happening in our industry.
It's like positive pessimism, though. That's the thing. It's not beaten down, right?
Yeah.
It's just work through it. I mean, that's honestly, that's probably, you're a fighter. So you're always looking for a way out, around, through, right? Unconscious, broken, or dead, or you're still functioning.
Yep.
Right. Why would that not carry over to business, to life? Right.
Well, there's universal principles, and they don't care where they're applied.
Yeah.
They're
That's
always
right.
in play.
It doesn't matter.
Yep.
Well, that's interesting. So. TJ, this one, you and I both, I think there's a shift that we see, like these macro trends, right? Where we saw, okay, talked about mid-tech, and then we saw OEM, and then we saw OEM not generating out of like a knife native brand, but like someone who is deciding to have a knife company. We see now a push back into US manufacturing, and almost this convergence of where people actually started to learn some manufacturing techniques or principles from having things made by someone else, and then realizing like, I need to bring this in house. I need to learn it.
I could do this. Yep.
I can do this. And it's different than like maybe what you and I did, which is I'm going to make a knife because I can't afford it, and I'm going to use the tools that I have. And so now there's more knowledge, but I think what it's doing is it's actually creating the ability for people to, instead of focusing on becoming like a solo maker, it's like they're starting off with being a business.
And,
it's pretty cool.
That right there is what makes me very optimistic, is that in the past, even in heyday times of American manufacturing, it was usually like 2 or 3 mega manufacturers. I think the golden era that you described, I agree with that. And I think it looks more like a lot of smaller manufacturers because of the accessibility of all the equipment and technology that we've talked about.
Knowledge.
And it's, you have YouTube, you have the internet, you have CNC mills that fit in garages. You have ways of doing things that didn't exist in bygone eras, to where, a resurgence could look like a complete tapestry of different processes being authored across the country. And it's smaller individual cells of manufacturing, which I think is so cool. I look forward to that.
Well, I do want to clarify one thing. I think I flipped pessimist and optimist when I was describing my. I'm the ultimate optimist. Let's say that. But look at what the custom makers bring to the table. I don't believe that Gerber, and I'm just using them as an example. It's not reality. I don't think Gerber has gone. I think we should try using zirconium and some mokume combination of metals that's never been used before to make our new knives. I think a lot of that stuff, which sometimes ends up being almost an industry standard, if you will. I think a lot of that stuff, when you're talking about those collaborations, those are the things that these custom makers, I'll tell you what, custom knife makers and also gunsmiths, to a degree or whatever, they're very innovative. They're very particular. Their attention to detail. They're perfectionists. They're all of those good things put together. They're innovators. They're creators. All of the things that are here's the biggest example of all. Bob Loveless, I'm using 154 cm steel. Boom. 3 or 4 years later, it's almost the industry standard that was at that time. These custom knife makers bring to the table all that innovation, all that creativity, all that creation of new, untried things. They're willing to give it a shot. And that's why, again, they're some of the smartest people I've ever known in my life. It's just amazing to me that, God, I wish I could be that smart,
I'm routinely amazed by my friends. Like, not to blow smoke up TJ's ass, but I look at him and I'm like, dude, I don't understand this the way you understand it. And I get frustrated, and then I get grateful that I know him. And I'm like, I feel like when, you go walk around a show, you're like, these people, you're just surrounded by like smart, kind, talented people.
It's a hell of a brain trust when you walk into a knife show.
I know, it really is. That's pretty funny. But guys, we're running on 3 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Ernest, I
Yeah.
want to make sure that we're being aware of your time. So how are we feeling, guys? You want to talk a little more? Want to wrap it up?
Well, I'm good. I'm good either way, but I do need to get home sometime today. So if you have a couple more questions, let's do that. If you don't mind me telling you, uh, I also I also write books, and I've
Yeah,
got a
we want to
couple
get into the
some
rest,
books.
man. Yeah.
Okay, but we can give you a little bit more rope,
We
and
can
we'll see what
also
we
look.
got.
I mean, I'm really enjoying this on a personal, just like on a selfish level. This is super enjoyable, right? I'm
Mhm.
loving it. We could do a round two at some point, and there's more. There's just more here. There always is, but yeah. What if we? I mean,
We could
what
do
do
round two.
you do a round two?
Let's leave it up to your audience. If they're interested uh, and not bored, I'm totally up to go. And I'll whatever you guys want to do. But there's a lot more. It's it's
It's
just
Certainly.
too much.
crazy.
This is you start to unpack it, and you just realize like it the just the stories alone or the processes involved or the decisions, I still want to ask you, like, you were a custom maker who went factory, and it's like, but you're also artistic, and this is something that I struggle with. How do you balance the two as you're scaling and getting less time being creative? And I know TJ's got some manufacturing things to lay out.
Yeah.
How are you doing on time, TJ? Let's do this. Let's call it for today with a couple more questions, and
Okay.
then let's do a round two. But
If you
where
want.
do we want to
Yeah.
close on? We definitely want to. Everybody wants that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, this has been a lot of fun. Yeah, this is good. Closing question. So just real quick, um, what do you feel like is the hard bottleneck of starting a knife company? It's just a high at a high level. We're trying to grow knife companies and stuff. Maybe some people listening are too. What are the bottlenecks in succession you see occurring when you're trying to build a company?
Well, the main and some of this is philosophical. Um, the main thing is if you make that decision, you need to make that decision. If you're going to do it, you got to go for it. You can't half go for it or whatever because you're bound for you're only lucky if you succeed at that point. You have to go all in, and uh, you need to know that the 40-hour work week is gone, long, long gone. And it's going to be 80-hour work weeks and things like that. And I'm not exaggerating, and you guys know that. Uh, but it's a matter of you need to have the faith, which involves a lot of introspective. You got to take a long look at yourself, literally a long look in the mirror and say, can I do this? And if I can't do it, am I willing to sacrifice the effort to learn how to do it? And not just half learn how to do it, but I mean full immersion therapy into it because it will consume everything. And that's not just true of knife making. That's any business that's uh, entrepreneurship entrepreneurship type endeavor because you're pretty much alone in that regard. Now, you have a great support community out there. The knife makers are free and easy, giving advice and helping and saying, "Oh, don't do that. That's a mistake. Don't go down that road." You get all of that from our community, but at the same time, you're alone when it comes down to, honey, we got to take a second mortgage out on the house
Mm-hmm.
because I can't do this unless I buy this machine, or I need to have a facility that's larger. So we're going to take on another 12 or $1,500 a month rent payment from where we can put this facility and things like that. So you got to look at things. I mean, it's easy to say, "Hey, I can play pro basketball." Well, no, you can't. You might
Mm,
think you can, but you really can't until you get out there on the court, or you really look at it and go, yeah, all those other guys are 6'7", and and they're giants compared to me. You've got to take that. You can get, uh, you can wear blinders that are fueled by your passion, and you can't let that be a driving. It has to be a driving force, but you can't let it be the driving force for business decisions. It's
Yeah.
one
You can't
thing.
lie to yourself.
Yes, you cannot.
yeah.
And making stuff in your garage and that, you can be as wild and crazy as you want to be. But those responsibilities that we talked about, family and your family's future and all that good stuff, it's going to ride on these decisions. So you really got to say, you know what, am I the man to do this? And if you are, you are. It reminds me of David Goggins. He lost 100 pounds in like 2 months or something like that. So shit can be done, but
Right.
it takes a resolve that's you know ironclad. And I'm not trying to dissuade people that might have the idea to become a knife maker, but just be aware that it looks like fun, but it's the hardest job you'll ever take on in your life. It really is. But if you enjoy it, like a friend of mine told me one time, he said, Ernie, you get a job you love, you never work another day in your life. And I think you guys understand what I'm saying. Um, it's really not work for us. But at the same time, there's a lot of serious
Doesn't
stuff
make
that
it
has to
easy.
happen
Yeah.
to make that fun happen too. So,
Yeah.
uh, you know, the other thing too is I would say this, go with your gut feel on every decision that you make, whether
Mhm.
it's working with a company or a vendor or anybody else. If I don't like the guy, you're not on my you're not on my list. I will not put my future into the hands of someone that I do not trust, or,
Amen.
or someone that doesn't have the same value system that I have, because that's a recipe for disaster. And I've seen it happen with several guys in the industry. I also will say this, don't take on an investor. You can either make it
Mhm.
work and then down the road scale up if you decide to make that, but don't take on an investor at the beginning of your endeavor. I'm not talking just to you guys, I'm talking to other
Hmm.
knife makers that are out there, because guys will come around waving money. And our company has we've probably had, no exaggeration at all, 3 dozen entities, including other knife companies, come up and say, we want to buy your company. and
Hmm.
and I could be sitting on a sailboat in Tahiti right now, honest, because the money's been pretty substantial. But at the same time, this is what I want to do. I don't want to be on a
Right.
boat in Tahiti. I might have liked it. I don't know. I never tried it, but uh, if it's yours, it's one of the few things outside of your family that it belongs to you. So
Yeah.
you got to shepherd it. You got to fertilize it. You got to grow it. You got to treat it with respect. And I think that's almost more important than some of the nuts and bolts issues, because uh, buying machinery and stuff like that, that's always a doable thing. It's just a matter of having the right, getting a lease or getting a loan or paying cash or whatever it is. But it's yours. It's in your hands. Treat it like the most precious thing that you can, and you're going to succeed. You really
That's a,
will.
that's a great answer. It feels like a parting thoughts for part one to
I,
me.
I really feel like that, because
Yeah.
what's going to happen is if we start up again, we're going to go
Yeah.
for another hour minimum.
Yeah.
And we still want to dig in. We want to dig into the books. We want to, man, there's a lot there. So if you will humor us
Sure.
with coming back and just talking knife,
Heck
we
yeah.
would love to do that, and we'll just figure out a time that works for everybody.
I'm honored you guys
Likewise.
Oh,
wanted to hear my stuff. So,
we're honored.
well, thank you.
So much fun. It'll have my
Yeah.
gears turning for days or weeks or months here. So
I,
I love it.
yeah, my knife nerd cup is full. It's got a lot of stuff to look up too. So
Well, thank you guys for
um
listening. This has been our longest episode yet, and hope you enjoyed every minute. I know I did.
yeah, Ernest, thank you for coming on,
Yeah.
man. And guys, we'll see you around.
Nice to
Have a
have
good
the
one.
time to talk about this stuff. I love it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Peace.
Bye bye.